What if Tyrion Lannister walked away from his trial by combat victorious? Let us explore the depths of that single moment and how it reshapes the fate of Westeros in this video. The royal courtyard holds its breath as Oberyn Martell circles Gregor Clegane. Sunlight glints along the length of the spear. The mountain lunges, heavy and brutal. The Dornish prince pivots, feet sure upon the blood-slick stones. This time, he does not slip. This time, there is no stumble, no careless spin, no gloating monologue that leaves his skull within reach of those crushing hands. The spear drives home. The point bursts through Gregor's visor, iron shrieks, and bone yields with a wet final crack. The mountain falls. His great helm caves inward, skull shattered, brains and blood spattering the sand in a grisly halo. For a heartbeat, there is nothing. Yes, only the echo of that last impact ringing against the walls of the Red Keep. Then the silence deepens. No roar, no celebration, only the stunned, horrified quiet of nobles and small folk who have just watched a legend of slaughter die under Dorne's banner. Tyrion stands alone in his chains, breathing shallowly. He had steeled himself to die in this place, under his father's cold gaze and his sister's satisfied smile. Now, the rules of the realm close like a trap around them instead. Trial by combat has spoken. By the law of gods and men, Tyrion Lannister is innocent. He feels neither love nor acceptance in that moment. Only the sick, vertiginous awareness that he has been spared and that nothing in this castle will ever be simple again. What happens when the most dangerous Lannister survives the day he was meant to die? And the answer does not end with one crushed skull on the courtyard floor. It begins there. It begins with Tywin, whose careful edifice of power now contains a son he cannot openly condemn. It begins with Cersei, who has staked her hatred, her accusations, and her pride upon Tyrion's guilt, only to see the gods themselves refute her. It begins with Jaime, torn between twin loyalties, watching the brother he once loved and the father whose praise he still craves. This only grows when the ripples spread outward, past the red stone of the castle, past the city walls and the reeking alleys of the village below. Oberyn Martell has his victory and his vengeance, yet he continues to stand in the capital alive, triumphant, and very much a prince of Dorne. Doran Martell now holds a different hand entirely. The Tyrells, ever watchful, that must reconsider the balance between Lannister gold and Dornish spears. Even across the narrow sea, Daenerys Targaryen's long game is quietly altered because the man who once fled King's Landing in chains now remains in place as heir to his father's grudges and secrets. This is not merely a change in plot, but a change in pressure. One victory turns Tyrion from condemned scapegoat into the most volatile asset in King's Landing, a man bound by law yet loosed from fear, standing at the center of his family's crumbling legacy. From this bloody courtyard, through the fragile reign of Tommen Baratheon and the slow decay of Lannister power, this timeline will follow how that single spared life reshapes alliances, succession, and the final reckoning for Tywin's house. In the next section, the story will linger on the first hours after the duel, the walk back into the castle, the private audience chambers, and the moment father and son must face each other with death suddenly taken off the table. How we're rewriting the game. Rules of this what if. The walk back into the castle will decide everything. The duel is over. The mountain lies broken in the dust, and Oberyn Martell has done what he came for. He has given Tyrion Lannister his life back. From this point, the game does not restart. It only bends. Every slight, every death, every betrayal up to that clash in the yard remains. Joffrey still chokes at his own wedding, Sansa still vanishes into the night, and Tyrion still stands accused as Kingslayer and Kinslayer. The only change is that the spear finds its mark, not the sand. In this exploration, all prior canon holds until Oberyn's victory and Tyrion's acquittal. As he grows up through the story, the audience knows nothing is touched. The branch begins only when the bells ring for divine judgment in his favor. That judgment is not a mere technicality. In Westeros, a trial by combat is more than spectacle. It is prayer with steel. The gods are asked to favor the innocent, and when Oberyn walks away and Gregor does not, the verdict is absolute. Tyrion is innocent in the eyes of gods and men. Tywin may feel neither love nor acceptance for this son, but he cannot simply drag him back to the cells without shattering the very laws that hold the realm together. Cersei's fury can boil, the court can whisper, yet in the ledger of faith and custom, Tyrion walks free. All this only grows when the camera moves from the yard into chambers and council rooms. The hand of the king must now rule beside a son he tried to condemn. Tyrion continues to exist as both political asset and personal humiliation. Publicly, Tywin must acknowledge the verdict. Privately, father and heir remain at war. That tension between legal protection and familial hatred will be the engine of this timeline. To follow that engine clearly, the story will move arc by arc. For Lannister politics, the canon path will be recalled. Tywin ruling through Tommen, Cersei guarding her son, Jaime drifting from his father's designs. Then the path will bend, tracking how a vindicated Tyrion, still master of coin and reputation, and still heir in many eyes, strains the fragile peace of the castle. For Dorne, Oberyn's survival and victory will be set against the original thirst for revenge, asking how a living champion changes Sunspear's patience. For the Tyrell Alliance and the Iron Bank, the narrative will return to the debts, the food, the gold under Casterly Rock, and then watch how a shrewd, legally untouchable Lannister reshapes negotiations. Even Daenerys' distant march through Slaver's Bay will be measured against this altered balance, to see whether the Dragon Queen meets a different Lannister across the narrow sea, or never meets him at all. The tone will remain steady and somber, alternating between close, cinematic scenes. A council chamber gone silent, a father's hand tightening on a goblet, and cooler stretches of political analysis anchored in the character psychology. At every step, and one question will linger beneath the dialogue and the strategy. Does Tyrion's survival save Westeros from chaos, or does it merely move the fault lines so that the realm breaks in new and more terrible places? The next section will begin where the bells stop ringing, in the first private confrontation between Tywin and his acquitted son, when both men must decide what a free Tyrion is allowed to be. Rewinding the tape, Tyrion's road to the arena. The bells have stopped ringing, but the echoes that drive Tyrion toward the arena begin much earlier, at a different feast, beneath a different song. The Purple Wedding is meant to seal victory. The banners of House Lannister and Tyrell hang heavy over the castle court. Wine flows, and Joffrey Baratheon plays the king as a cruel child plays with painted soldiers. He mocks his uncle before the court, spills wine on him, parades dwarfs in a grotesque reenactment of war. Then his laughter curdles. He claws at his throat. He dies with purple lips and bulging eyes. And in the chaos that follows, Cersei does not hesitate. Her finger finds Tyrion as surely as a blade finds a sheath. The narrative is convenient, almost too clean. The hated uncle who dared speak back, who never bowed enough, who would not flatter a sadist for praise or coin, suddenly stands beside the poisoned cup. His hand was on the chalice, his words had stung the king, and in a court that has always whispered about the imp behind closed doors, suspicion hardens into accusation. As he grows up in this glittering lion's den, he feels neither love nor acceptance from his sister. Now, at last, she has the story she has always wanted. The trial that follows is not a search for truth. It is theater, carefully staged beneath the cold gaze of Tywin Lannister. Witness after witness steps forward. Knights who remember only insolence. Courtiers who recall every cutting jest, but forget every act of service. Servants who have learned how valuable it is to echo Cersei's hatred. Each testimony is a stone, and together they build a scaffold in the throne room, not a court. This only grows when Shae appears. Once the woman who shared his bed and his secrets, she now repeats Cersei's script, calling him a monster, a schemer, a kinslayer in waiting. Her words are a blade turned inward, flaying the last illusions he held about love, loyalty, and the small refuge he had carved for himself, in a world that had always treated him as an embarrassment. Tywin watches, impassive. He's a father presiding over the slow public unmaking of his own son. Tyrion breaks at last. The speech that spills from him is less defense than indictment, of the court, of the city, of the family that used him when convenient and cast him aside when it cost them nothing. He rejects their judgment, rejects the pretense of justice, and reaches instead for the only weapon Westeros still offers a man it refuses to hear: He demands trial by combat. Into that demand steps Oberyn Martell. The Red Viper does not come for love of Tyrion or for acceptance from this court. He comes for Elia, for the children smashed against walls, for the long memory of Dorne. Championing Tyrion allows him to face Gregor Clegane in the open, to drag Tywin's sins into the light, and to turn this Lannister son into an instrument of Dornish vengeance. He continues to smile, to circle, to promise justice with every measured step. In canon, the dance ends in horror. Oberyn slips, his spear shatters, and the mountain's hands close around his skull. The arena becomes an abattoir, and Tyrion's last hope dies in a spray of blood and bone. Freeze that image. Hold the instant before the fall, before the gloating, before the scream. Because in this telling, the spear does not falter, the Red Viper does not stumble, and the next heartbeat will tilt the fate of every castle and every crown in Westeros. The kill that changes everything. Oberyn's clean victory. In the stillness between heartbeats, everything tilts the other way. Gregor's gauntleted hand lashes out, grasping at air where Oberyn's ankle should be. But the Dornish prince is already moving, already learning. The memory of his sister's torn body burns behind his eyes, yet this time, he does not let rage drag him down into the mountain's reach. He circles instead, short steps, spear low, the bronze head glistening with poison, the sand-red cloak whispering over blood-soaked stone. The first thrust is cautious, a testing jab at Gregor's exposed thigh, just above a cracked plate. Steel bites flesh. Black-red blood spills, thick and slow, and the giant staggers but does not fall. Oberyn does not close. He continues to wheel around the larger man, keeping the full length of the spear between them, refusing the temptation to stand over him and demand confession. His chant changes. No more shouted accusations, only a low, steady litany, as if spoken to the gods who watch from the sept beyond the walls. The second strike is crueler. A sweeping cut behind the knee, severing tendon, driving the mountain down to one ruined leg. Gregor swings wildly, sword carving empty air, his breathing a ragged rattle inside the helm. The crowd leans forward. Even the high lords on the balcony forget themselves. This is no longer spectacle, it is execution by inches. The poison works unseen, threading through Gregor's veins, turning brute strength into clumsy, failing motion. Oberyn's final advance is measured. No flourish, no leap, no exposed skull within arm's reach of those enormous hands. He plants his feet just outside the mountain's desperate grasp, levels the spear, and drives it straight through the visor into the single dark slit of Gregor Clegane's eye. The impact echoes off the castle walls, a wet, sickening crunch, and then the mountain is only meat collapsing in iron. Then the silence falls. The mountain's corpse steams on the sand, pinned to the earth like a skewered boar. For a long breath, no one moves. Then the gold cloaks look to the royal box, to the boy king, and the hand beside him. The herald's voice cracks as he cries the verdict of the gods. By trial of combat, Tyrion Lannister is innocent of regicide and free to go. In that moment, Tyrion feels neither love nor acceptance from the faces staring down at him. The words say, innocent, but the eyes around the yard say, monster. He stands very still, chains heavy on his wrists, as he grows up all over again in a single heartbeat, understanding that law has spared him, yet the city still dreams of his death. On the dais, Tywin's jaw tightens, a single blink, a shallow breath, the smallest flicker of shock that passes like a shadow over stone. His careful plan to condemn an unwanted son before half the court has shattered in public. And for the first time in many years, the father does not control the board as completely as he believed. This only grows when he sees Oberyn standing alive, spear dripping, Dorne's vengeance satisfied, without giving Tywin any corpse to trade. Cersei does not hide her fury. Her hands clutch the railing until the knuckles pale, eyes fixed on Tyrion with a hatred that has been building since childhood. In her mind, Joffrey's face is still purple, still gasping, and the gods have just declared that the brother she despises did not do it. Rage wars with disbelief. If the gods are just, then justice has failed her. If the gods are blind, then the whole sacred system that condemned her enemies and protected her children is a hollow lie. Though the first cracks in her faith in oaths, in trials, in the very rules of the game, open there in that hot, echoing yard. Tyrion hears the proclamation, hears the chains being unlocked, but there is no triumph in him, only a cold, hollow space where relief should live. He walks out not as a beloved heir reclaimed, but as an unwanted son the city is forbidden to touch. Around him, whispers coil like smoke. He understands that this reprieve is not an ending. It is a new beginning, one in which he continues to breathe in a castle that would rather see him buried beneath it. And as he steps away from the corpse of the mountain and the blazing eyes of his sister, his thoughts are already turning to the next move and to the quiet, patient shape of vengeance, or Tywin's mask. Cracks, a father cornered by the gods. The yard still stinks of blood and crushed bone when all eyes turn, as if pulled by a string, to the man on the dais who has not moved. Tywin Lannister sits as though carved from the same pale stone as the Iron Throne itself, but the mask he has worn for a lifetime is beginning, just barely, to crack. He cannot ignore what has happened. Trial by combat is not a mummer's farce. It is the language by which gods speak in this kingdom of steel and whispers. To kill Tyrion now, to order archers to loose or gold cloaks to seize him, would be to spit in the faces of the Seven and in the eyes of every lord and hedge knight packed into the gallery. The faith would howl, the Tyrells would take careful note, and in the alleys below the castle, the small folk who already mutter about a strangled boy king would find a new story of Lannister blasphemy to pass from village to village. Tywin understands this in an instant. His hatred does not vanish, it sharpens. As he grows up in his father's shadow, Tyrion had always seen that cold, assessing stare. Now, for the first time, that stare meets a son who cannot be quietly erased. Joffrey is dead. Tommen is gentle, pliable, and far too weak to be the spine of a dynasty. Jaime is Kingsguard and maimed, an heir in name only. Tyrion, the son for whom he feels neither love nor acceptance, is suddenly the most dangerous piece on the board, and also the most necessary. So, Tywin chooses performance. He rises, every movement measured, and gives the faintest inclination of his head toward the victor and the accused. A curt nod, a dry pronouncement that the gods have spoken, and the matter is settled, nothing more. The hall hears piety and submission. Those who know him hear something else, a man swallowing poison because the law and the faith have left him no other cup. Behind that thin veneer, the calculations begin. Tyrion must be bound, not broken, buried under responsibilities, smothered in duties that keep him close, keep him watched, keep him useful. Hand of the king again, perhaps, or master of coin and truth this time, with every ledger a leash. If he cannot be condemned, he can be overworked, overruled, and quietly isolated until his victories taste like ash. Yet the verdict has given Tyrion something Tywin never intended him to have, a kind of moral gravity. Acquitted after a sham trial, in surviving a spectacle that exposed Lannister cruelty before half the realm, he becomes, whether he desires it or not, a quiet emblem of injustice in King's Landing. Gold cloaks speak of him in taverns, washerwomen whisper about the son who stood alone against his own father, and this only grows when Dornish tongues carry the tale back across the narrow sea. Tywin hears those whispers long before they reach his solar. He continues to watch his son with that same flat, appraising gaze, and in the silence between them, a vow is forged. If the sword and the headsman are denied to him, then he will kill Tyrion more slowly, with duty that grinds, with humiliation that never quite breaks the law, with accidents that almost look like chance. And as the court disperses and the first new orders are drafted, a single question hangs, unanswered, on over the Red Keep. Which Lannister will strike first? Cersei's worst day. When hate loses in public. Which Lannister will strike first? In the throne room's fading echoes, Cersei already knows her answer, and it is not the one the gods have given. The mountain lies broken. Oberyn stands victorious, and Tyrion walks away from death, as if the stranger himself has stepped aside. For Cersei, this is not justice twisted, it is blasphemy made flesh. Since the moment Joanna died screaming in that birthing bed, she has carried a single, corrosive certainty: that her youngest brother is a monster who murdered their mother and then grew up only to murder her son. As he grows up in the shadow of the castle, Every cutting jest, every whoreson smile, becomes another proof in her private ledger. This only grows when Joffrey's purple face haunts her dreams, and in those dreams, Tyrion is always the one tightening the invisible cord around the boy's throat. So, when the trial by combat ends with Tyrion alive, it feels to her like the gods have chosen their side, and it is not hers. She stood before lords and small folk, before Tyrell roses and Dornish sons, and swore that her brother was guilty. She staked not only a legal claim, but the raw truth of a grieving mother. Now, with the Red Keep's galleries buzzing and whispers already racing down to the lowest village, she must watch that same brother step out from beneath the shadow of the axe, under what the faith will call divine protection. Humiliation wraps around her more tightly than any cloak. The queen who promised retribution has been publicly overruled by the Seven themselves. Each bow offered to Tyrion, each careful nod from a cautious lord, is an unspoken question about her judgment, her authority, her sanity. He feels neither love nor acceptance from this court, but she sees something far worse. A dangerous, wounded man being granted legal innocence and, more importantly, political leverage. In that moment, her mind turns. If the gods will not punish him, if the law will not cage him, then she continues to imagine other tools. Poison that leaves no trace. Rumors that drip like venom into Tommen's gentle ear. Accidents on hunting trips, or a sudden riot in Flea Bottom where a single Lannister can vanish beneath a frightened crowd. The options parade themselves before her in a cold, methodical procession. And it is here that the first crack with Tywin truly opens. In private, she demands blood. Her father answers with numbers, alliances, and the need to keep the newly vindicated son close, at least for now. Tywin speaks of appearances, of the heir and his responsibilities, of how Tyrion's survival can yet be turned to their advantage. To Cersei, it sounds like praise for the monster who killed her child. The pattern shatters for her when Tywin's voice, once an unchallengeable law of nature, begins to sound merely human, fallible, old. If he will not destroy Tyrion, then he has chosen the wrong child to protect. That night, behind locked doors and shuttered windows, Cersei's grief hardens into vow. As long as she breathes, Tyrion will never feel safe in King's Landing. If he walks its halls as a free man, why, he will walk them knowing that every cup, every council meeting, every smiling servant might be the first move in a game only she and he truly understand, and the next move, waiting just beyond the door, will drag them both toward open war. The city reacts. From monster to martyr. Outside those shuttered windows, the city listens. Word of the duel spreads first as rumor, then as revelation. The Red Viper lives, the mountain dies, and Tyrion Lannister walks away with the god's judgment at his back. In the alleys below the castle, in wine-sour taverns and cramped rooms above bakeries, the small folk repeat the tale with the same nervous awe they once reserved for wildfire and dragons. They remember him. The demon monkey who barked orders on the walls during Blackwater, who brought shipwrights' coin into the docks and grain into the markets, who placed chains across the river while the great lords argued. As he grows up in their stories, his shape changes. Less a monster at a distant feast, more the half-seen commander in battered armor, shouting for archers to hold. He feels neither love nor acceptance from them, not truly, but there is a wary respect. This only grows when the Septons whisper that the gods themselves have cleared him of kingslaying. In the cramped courts of Flea Bottom, in the shadow of the Red Keep's walls, his acquittal settles like a stone in still water. The ripples are quiet, but they spread. Commoners who watched a man dragged in chains for a crime everyone knows he could not prove or disprove, see something of themselves in that helplessness. Minor knights and petty lords. Yet those who have knelt in Tywin's solar and felt their fates decided with a single raised eyebrow begin to murmur that if a Lannister heir can be nearly killed on a queen's whim, what chance does a landed knight from a forgotten village have? Varys hears those murmurs. In the soft gloom of his chambers, he continues to collect them as carefully as other men collect debts. To him, Tyrion is no longer just a clever captive. He is a valuable, wounded piece. A man branded by injustice, yet armored by survival. A survivor can be pointed. A victim can be elevated. Together, they can be turned into a symbol. Littlefinger, if he lingers in the capital in this telling, tastes something else on the air. Opportunity. Chaos at court is a ladder, but chaos in the streets is a fire, and Tyrion's new legend offers both. Met a Lannister who speaks the language of taverns and counting houses, who has already proven he can administer a castle and a city, can become either a rival power base or the perfect accelerant. Beyond the city, foreign eyes narrow. Dorne's envoys, who came expecting to leave with only a corpse and a story of vengeance, instead gain a living ally who has seen Tywin's ruthlessness up close, and now owes Oberyn Martell his life. The Tyrells, watching from their manors along the river and their manse in the city, must reassess every quiet calculation around Tommen's regency. A humbled, grateful Tyrion could be a bridge. A resentful, vindicated one could be a threat to Margaery's careful ascent. And it is here that a final possibility takes shape. Tyrion's new reputation as survivor, as victim, run as the man the gods themselves pulled back from the edge, can be forged into a weapon sharper than any sword if he dares to lean into it, and if his father does not move first. Behind closed doors, Tywin's new plan for his most dangerous son. Tywin does move first. The small council chamber is cleared with a word, the gold cloaks ushered out, the Tyrell cousins dismissed, even Pycelle sent tottering away. In the quiet that follows, only the ticking of the great clock and the distant murmur of the castle remain, as father and son face one another across polished wood that has seen the rise and ruin of kings. Tyrion is no longer in chains, yet he feels neither love nor acceptance in this room. The victory in the yard still clings to him like sweat and dust. Oberyn's triumph ringing in the city's gossip, but here, and under his father's gaze, it is reduced to an inconvenience to be managed. Tywin does not speak of innocence. Tywin speaks of necessity. He lays it out with the same cold precision he once used to break rebellious lords in the Westerlands. Joffrey is dead. Tommen is a boy barely old enough to hold a sword, much less a kingdom. Jaime is bound to the Kingsguard, his sword hand ruined, his claim to Casterly Rock abandoned. Cersei is Cersei, impulsive, proud, ready to burn the village to save the castle. In that litany of weakness, one truth becomes undeniable. Someone must actually govern. So, Tywin reframes the future. No dungeons, he says, and no execution. Instead, responsibilities. Duties that sound like honors but feel like shackles. Tyrion will resume the office of Master of Coin, where his sums and schemes kept the realm solvent even as his father waged war. He will sit on the small council daily, preside over petitions, and quietly become Tommen's chief advisor whenever the boy king must learn the business of rule. It is offered not as mercy, but as a test. A chance, Tywin claims, to redeem the family name after the scandal of the trial, to prove that the heir who shames his father can yet serve Lannister interests. The words are smooth, the tone controlled, yet Tyrion hears the iron beneath. As he grows up, he has heard that tone whenever Casterly Rock's enemies were being measured for their graves. He continues to listen, outwardly still, inwardly racing, power with chains, influence without escape. Every signature on a royal decree, every whispered word in Tommen's ear will be watched, weighed, ready to be turned into proof that the imp, though in this life his body is unmarked, remains a monster in his father's eyes. This only grows when Tywin mentions that any further embarrassment will void all protections the gods have just granted. Tyrion recognizes the trap completely, and recognizes something else. Outside these walls, Cersei's hatred is hunting for a pretext, and Margaery's smiles are knives wrapped in roses. Proximity to the throne is the only armor thick enough to matter now, so he bows his head, accepts the role, and lets Tywin believe that fear has tamed him. Yet as he leaves that chamber, the new Master of Coin already counting favors and enemies, a different question begins to take shape. What happens when the most dangerous Lannister learns to rule from inside the cage? The answer will not stay behind closed doors for long. Oberyn lives. Dorne's vengeance goes public. The answer will not stay behind closed doors for long. It walks into the blazing sunlight of the Red Keep's yard, wearing Dornish armor and a smile full of broken teeth and older grief. Oberyn Martell does not fall. The spear does not slip. The mountain skull gives way with a wet, echoing crack, and for a heartbeat, the whole castle seems to forget how to breathe. Then, instead of triumphantly circling a dying giant, the Red Viper plants the butt of his spear beside Gregor's ruined head and raises his voice so that every lord, lady, and gold cloak can hear. He names Elia. He names her children. He names the sack of King's Landing, the burning of a once proud princess, the babes dashed against walls. Short declarative accusations, followed by longer, more poisonous elaborations, spill into the open air. And this only grows when he turns, very deliberately, toward the royal box and speaks not of one man's savagery, but of the command that unleashed it. Ser Gregor, he declares, did not choose that cruelty alone. He does not yet name Tywin. He does not need to. Every eye in the yard follows his gaze. Every rumor about the old lion's orders, whispered in tavern and village for years, suddenly stands in the light. The trial by combat has declared Tyrion innocent in the eyes of gods and men, but Oberyn uses its stage to put another trial in motion, one that no septon has sanctioned. This forces the crown's hand. Half the court has heard a Prince of Dorne accuse the king's champion of war crimes and hint at the hand's complicity. But to dismiss it outright would be to insult Dorne's honor. To admit it fully would be to stain the Lannister name beyond polish. Tommen is too young to understand the trap, but Tywin sees it instantly. So Tywin offers justice that is, in truth, damage control. Gregor's body, broken, poisoned, yet technically still breathing, is to be sent away, first to the Citadel, then, when the Maesters demur, to Qyburn under the guise of study and punishment. The hand speaks of law, of precedent, of the responsibilities of the crown to investigate. In private, he orders that no written confession, no sworn testimony ever link those old atrocities back to his hand. Tyrion watches all this from the sand, free in name, but now something more dangerous, publicly vindicated. Yes, privately aware that his father will mutilate truth itself to keep his own armor clean. As he grows up into this new role at court, he continues to mark every hesitation, every concession Tywin makes to keep Dorne from storming away. Because Oberyn lives, Dorne's position hardens. They have a breathing prince in King's Landing, a corpse at his feet as evidence, and a Lannister heir who owes his life to Dornish steel. Oberyn visits Tyrion not as a passing ally, but as a recurring presence, needling at old wounds, offering new paths. In those late conversations, amidst candles and maps, another possibility begins to take shape. An alliance that links the lion's cunning to the viper's vengeance. One that could bend not only the politics of King's Landing, but the entire balance of power, from the Marcher Lords to the deserts of Dorne. Next, the question is no longer whether Tyrion survives. It becomes who he is willing to betray, and how far south he is willing to let that betrayal reach. Tyrion's inner reckoning, from broken prisoner to reluctant player. And in the silence after the cheering dies, Tyrion is left alone with the echo of breaking bone and the knowledge that his life has been bought by another man's hatred. He walks out of the yard a free man in the eyes of the law, yet inside he feels neither love nor acceptance, only a raw, flayed absence where faith in family and justice once sat. Shay's voice still rings in his skull, each lie sharpened by the truth that she had once whispered the same words in his bed. His father's cold gaze during the trial, the way Tywin had been perfectly willing to let him die as a spectacle, settles over him like a second sentence. The legal acquittal cannot touch that. It cannot unmake the moment he realized that in this castle that raised him, he has never truly been a son. This only grows when he is escorted back through the Red Keep, not to a cell, but to chambers hastily prepared, as if a new mask can be thrown over the same bruised face. Servants bow, gold cloaks avert their eyes. Somewhere, Cersei rages, and Tywin calculates. Tyrion tastes the victory and finds it ash in his mouth. He is alive, yes, but Shay is gone, not as a lover stolen by death, but as a weapon turned against him. His father remains Hand of the King. The court that condemned him yesterday now nods stiffly in acknowledgement. Love, family, the supposed honor of the court, each has been stripped bare as a transaction, a tool, a lie. In the days that follow, he continues to drift between two temptations. One waits in the bottom of a wine cup, oblivion, the gentle fade into irrelevance, a man who once might have been heir to Casterly Rock, now content to haunt brothels and cellars until someone finally decides he is no longer worth the trouble. The other is colder, It whispers of council chambers, of ledgers and ravens, of staying close to power, not to uphold his father's legacy, but to poison it slowly from within. To smile at Tywin across the small council table, to answer Cersei's open hatred with patient surgical humiliations that leave no trace. As he grows up in memory, flashes return unbidden. The wildfire over Blackwater Bay, the small folk chanting his name as he bled from the face. The moment he realized that even saving the city could not win Tywin's praise. Back then, he had ridden out his hand in all but name, had taken on responsibilities his father despised but needed, had held the fragile line between the throne and chaos. Tywin had answered that service not with acceptance, but with exile to the margins of his own victory feast. That pattern now hardens into something like doctrine in Tyrion's mind. No deed, no sacrifice will ever be enough for this father. So in the quiet hours, when the candles burn low and the city outside the castle walls mutters in its sleep, he makes a choice. He will not vanish into his cups. He will sit the councils, read the ledgers, listen to Varys' whispers and the clink of Tyrell gold. He will play the game, but no longer as a dutiful Lannister son seeking praise. Yes, he will play to survive the machine that ground him down, and, in time, to bend its gears. If the rules of this family and this court have marked him for death once, then his new purpose is simple. Learn those rules so completely that one day he can break them. Reforging the Lannister chain. Succession, Casterly Rock, and a free Tyrion. Tyrion walks out of the throne room, a condemned man reborn. And in that moment, the oldest question in House Lannister quietly reopens. Who, in truth, will rule the castle that birthed him? In canon, the answer is simple on parchment and impossible in practice. Jaime wears white, and the white cloak devours his claim. A Kingsguard knight holds no lands, fathers no heirs, commands no castle of his own. That leaves only one legitimate son of Tywin Lannister who can inherit Casterly Rock. The law, the custom, the maester's dry records all whisper the same name, Tyrion. As he grows up, that knowledge sits in the back of his mind like a coal, never quite going out, never quite being allowed to blaze. His trial by combat changes the color of that coal. Before, he was a suspected kinslayer, the uncle who murdered a king at his own wedding feast, a stain that even his father could point to as excuse. Now, he stands as a man cleared by divine judgment, his innocence hammered into place by the sight of Oberyn Martell shattering Gregor Clegane before the eyes of half the city. Trial by combat in this world is not merely spectacle, it is the gods' verdict. To strip Tyrion of his birthright after such a verdict is not just cruel, it is dangerous. Tywin understands that danger at once, and he hates it. In council, he continues to speak of his son in cool, measured tones, but in private, he dodges every attempt to force the question. He offers vague talk of proper reward, of lands and incomes befitting a loyal son, dangling lesser honors as if they were acceptance. He refuses always to say the words that matter, heir of Casterly Rock. To admit that would be to admit that the boy who killed Joanna now holds the future of the house in his hands. This only grows when Cersei realizes what the law now implies. The idea of Tyrion ruling the Rock, commanding Lannister gold and Lannister swords, horrifies her more than any prophecy from Maggie the Frog. She presses at the edges of the problem like a tongue against a broken tooth, whispering that perhaps Jaime's vows might be unmade, that a white cloak can be set aside in crisis, and that Tommen himself could be granted the castle under her guidance. Each scheme is less about stability and more about keeping Tyrion from ever hearing the word praise in the same breath as heir. And yet, as he continues to serve on the small council, every quiet success cuts deeper into that denial. He balances ledgers, soothes the city's hunger, reins in reckless bannermen, as he once did for a distant village under his father's eye. Each solved crisis makes his claim more obvious to lords who care for order, and more intolerable to Tywin and Cersei, who care only for control. How long can a house built on gold and fear endure with its rightful successor standing inside the walls, watching, learning, and beginning to choose exactly when to strike? Master of Coin, Dungeon Master of Survival, Tyrion and the Iron Bank. Gold and fear built the house that Tyrion now walks through, and both are running out. The ledgers tell the story more clearly than any bard. The crown owes the Iron Bank of Braavos a fortune large enough to buy half a kingdom, owes the Tyrells nearly as much in grain, ships, and coin, and owes its own people in unpaid wages and broken promises. The Lannister mines in the Westerlands run thinner each year, the easy veins exhausted, while the war against Stannis, the cost of Joffrey's wedding, and the endless garrisoning of castles bleed the treasury dry. Tyrion reads the numbers in silence, and in those lines of ink he feels neither love nor acceptance from the legacy his father has left. Only obligations, threats, and a narrowing road. As he grows up, his gold had been the language Tywin spoke most fluently, a weapon and a wall. Now, restored as master of coin after his vindication, Tyrion treats the books not as a shield, but as a battlefield. He continues to carve through waste with a cold precision that startles even the clerks who once mocked him. Royal feasts are pared back, redundant offices dissolved, and petty lords who have grown fat on false invoices find their incomes audited, their corruption dragged into the light behind closed doors. Bribes that once bought silence now buy information. Each seized ledger, each frightened confession, becomes another thread in a quiet web, stretching from dockside counting houses to the smallest village reeve. And then he does something no one expects from a Lannister in debt. He goes to the Iron Bank before the Iron Bank comes to him. Instead of Cersei's later arrogance, instead of a sullen default that dares Braavos to respond, Tyrion drafts a proposal that smells not of desperation, but of opportunity. Restructured payments over a longer term. Priority access for Braavosi ships in King's Landing and Lannisport. Quiet influence over certain crown contracts that will, over time, turn Westerosi gold into Braavosi profit. It is a gamble, but a calculated one, and he knows that in Braavos, contracts are almost a religion. From the Iron Bank's perspective, the contrast is stark. On one side, a paranoid queen-in-waiting whose temper is legend, whose counsel is shrinking, whose answer to pressure is to burn bridges and enemies alike. On the other, a competent wronged Lannister who respects ledgers as others respect swords. All who has survived his father's scorn and public trial without losing his grasp of consequences. This only grows when Braavosi envoys see how he handles his new responsibilities. Calm in crisis, merciless toward fraud, yet careful to honor every agreement once it is signed. The pattern interrupts what would have been Cersei's spiral. With the Iron Bank placated instead of provoked, with Tyrell loans managed instead of ignored, there is less immediate hunger in the streets, fewer unpaid guardsmen listening to fanatic whispers, less space for the faith militant to rise as an answer to chaos. Tyrion cannot erase his father's sins, cannot conjure new gold from dead mines, but by slowing the financial collapse, he alters the timing of every future crack in the realm. The question is no longer whether the debts will come due, but whether, when they do, the man holding the quill in the Red Keep will be the same man who once settled disputes for a distant village and learned exactly how much blood a kingdom can afford to lose. Shae's fate, rewritten, lover, traitor, or liability. What happens when the one person Tyrion strangled in canon keeps breathing in this timeline? The answer coils itself around his heart, and around the Lannister claim to moral authority, in ways Tywin cannot fully control. In the memory that haunts him, Shae stands in the throne room, voice steady as she twists their private tenderness into public accusation. She calls herself his whore, calls him a monster, and the hall laughs. In the original tale, that laughter ends in a bedchamber, in Tywin's bed in the Hand's Tower, or where Tyrion finds her wearing his father's chain and kills her with the same hands that once reached for acceptance and love. Here, Oberyn does not fall. Tyrion walks out legally innocent, and that single victory rips away the path that led to the desperate murder. Shae's position, however, is no triumph. She is exposed as a perjurer before half the castle, a woman who lied under oath to see an innocent man die. At the same time, she is known, whispered, half-acknowledged as Tywin's mistress, a stain that clings to the man who lectures lords on duty and discipline. As long as Tyrion lives and the gods have declared him blameless, keeping her close becomes dangerous. Every night she spends in the Hand's bedchamber is another night that rumor sharpens its knives. Tywin's instinct is simple. Problems that cannot be crushed are moved. So, one branch is cold and clean. A quiet ship from the harbor, a generous purse, and Shae vanishes toward Pentos, or bravos. No trial, no spectacle, only absence. Another path belongs to Cersei, whose hatred has never needed truth to justify itself. Under her hand, Shae becomes a listening ear in the lesser corridors. A spy in silk who reports on servants, guards, even Tommen's gentle conversations, her survival bought by betraying others. And there is the most volatile possibility, the one that keeps Varys watching. Shae, driven by guilt and fear, attempts to reach Tyrion himself. For Tyrion, that meeting would be a wound reopened. As he grows up, he learns to bury pain beneath wine and wit, but Shae was the one place he allowed himself to believe in something tender. Facing her again, he would feel the old longing, the memory of shared jokes and soft mornings, colliding with the image of her at the trial. He feels neither love nor acceptance in the Red Keep, and this only grows when the one woman who once called him "my lion" has already sold his life for a bag of Lannister gold. He continues to imagine different words on her lips, different choices, and in that imagination lies his weakness, longing, disgust, self-loathing, all braided together, all visible to those who know where to look. Cersei could dangle Shae's fate before him to provoke reckless defiance. Tywin could threaten exile or execution for her to force obedience from a son who has learned to care more for the powerless than for his father's praise. And beneath it all, Shae's mere survival becomes a loaded secret in the castle. If it ever becomes common knowledge that the hand of the king kept his son's former lover as his own, after using her to condemn that son unjustly, the careful fiction of Tywin as stern but righteous patriarch begins to crack. The man who lectures lords on honor would be revealed as a father who weaponized a woman's fear, a judge who slept with his own key witness. In a city that still remembers wildfire blooming over the Blackwater, one more spark against Tywin's image may be all it takes to make every future misstep look like proof of rot. That tension between what must remain hidden and what might be revealed will shape the next moves in the Red Keep, as each player decides whether Shae is a lover to be pitied, a traitor to be silenced, or a liability to be turned into a blade. Jaime between oaths and blood, the brother who chose wrong. Once in the wake of Shae's fragile fate being weighed like a coin on a scales, another figure in the Red Keep walks under a different kind of judgment, not from the gods, not from a trial by combat, but from his own memory. Jaime Lannister has seen his brother live, and somehow that makes the guilt cut deeper. In canon, that guilt becomes a road. It leads him down to the black cells, leads him to turn keys and locks, and send Tyrion through shadowed passages toward the Tower of the Hand, toward Tywin's privy, toward an arrow and a latrine and a dead father. Here, Oberyn's spear has already written a different verdict in the yard. Tyrion walks free by law, not by jailbreak, and Jaime never has to choose treason in the dark. Yet, as he grows up into this moment, then into a Kingsguard sworn to protect a king who nearly killed his own brother, he feels neither love nor acceptance from the man whose praise he once craved most. Their first private meeting after the acquittal is not in a cell, but in a quiet solar overlooking the city. The door closes, and for a moment, Jaime almost expects chains to rattle anyway. Tyrion breaks the silence first, of course. He jokes about how the gods have poor taste in champions, and how their father's face during the verdict could have cracked the castle stones, how Cersei nearly shook apart with rage. The words are barbed, but the tone is brittle. Jaime answers with awkward comforts, with stiff assurances that justice was done, that the truth prevailed, that their father will come around. Tyrion watches him with those sharp green eyes they share. He says little about the days before the trial, about the long hours when Tywin and Cersei built the case, and Jaime stayed mostly silent. The unspoken question hangs between them like a drawn sword. When the choice was between brother and father, where did Jaime truly stand? He continues to insist, to himself more than to Tyrion, that his vows to Tommen and his obedience to Tywin left no room to interfere. This only grows when Tyrion remains in the castle, not sent to the wall, not smuggled across the narrow sea, but seated at council tables and walking the same corridors. His presence becomes a living mirror. Every time Jaime repeats Tywin's maxims about duty or hears Cersei whisper about enemies, Tyrion's dry replies expose the cracks. A remark about the Red Wedding here, a quiet question about wildfire there. And suddenly Jaime is measuring his father's legacy against the charred fields and butchered guests that bought it. As he grows up into this new reality, Jaime begins to challenge, if only in private. He asks Tywin why Tyrion cannot be trusted with true responsibilities when the realm already leans on his mind. He wonders aloud if the heir to Casterly Rock should be the son who slaughters with a sword, or the one who can hold a village and a kingdom together with words. Each time, Tywin's cold dismissal pushes him back into line, but not quite as far as before. By the time the embers of the Blackwater are only a memory, Jaime finds himself caught in a tightening triangle, sworn to the king he once murdered a father to save, bound to the father who built their power on quiet atrocities. And shadowed by the brother who may be the only Lannister still capable of seeing clearly. The question is no longer whether Jaime will choose between oaths and blood, but when, and whether, when that moment comes, Tyrion will still be standing at his side, or already sharpening the knife that will cut House Lannister in two. The Tyrell equation, Margaery, Olenna, and a vindicated imp. Tyrion's imagined knife at Jaime's throat is not the only blade hanging over King's Landing. In the wake of his vindication, another calculus begins in the shadows of the Red Keep, the quiet, relentless arithmetic of House Tyrell. Their goals remain brutally simple. Margaery must be queen, the Reach must be secure, and the golden river of Tyrell grain and gold must flow toward the Iron Throne without ever draining Highgarden dry. Under Joffrey, this meant survival through appeasement, through smiles, through a wedding that ended in poisoned wine and purple foam. Under Tommen, it should have meant gentle guidance, a soft hand on a malleable boy. But a living, innocent Tyrion stands between them and that easy equation. On paper, he is an asset, a proven hand, a commander who held the city when others fled, a man who understands that a hungry village becomes a riot long before a castle falls. He can keep Tommen's reign stable, can speak hard truths in council that others fear to voice, can turn Tywin's cold strategy into something that at least glances toward justice. As he grows up into this new role beside a boy king, he continues to see the game with a clarity that few in that chamber possess. Yet, he is also a threat, and this only grows when the whispers begin. A wrong Lannister with a memory like a ledger, a keen observer who knows that Joffrey's death was too elegant, too convenient, too perfectly timed to be the work of a panicked fool. He feels neither love nor acceptance from the family that tried to kill him in a courtroom, and that absence of praise sharpens his gaze. The cup, the hairnet, the proximity of Olenna and Margaery at the feast. None of it proves anything, but all of it lingers. Olenna Tyrell, watching him from across the small council table, understands this at once. She respects intelligence, even when it cuts against her. And in Tyrion, she sees a rare thing in the capital, a man who can hurt Cersei more with words and ledgers than 100 swords could with steel. If he suspects the truth, he becomes dangerous. If that suspicion can be turned into partnership, he becomes invaluable. So her barbs soften, her questions grow more pointed, and her courtesies toward him become just a little too visible to be coincidence. Margaery follows a different path. In public, she is the queen who treats Tyrion with open respect, the only royal who speaks of his defense of the city as more than an inconvenient footnote. She visits the wounded from the Blackwater and names him before the crowds. She laughs at his jests in the throne room. She makes certain the small folk see a bridge, not a feud. Is it empathy or strategy? The distinction matters less than the effect. And so, the alliance around Tommen becomes a three-way dance. Cersei clutches at her son, Tyrion counsels him. Olenna surrounds him with Reachmen, each smiling, each offering guidance, each quietly poisoning the others in his mind. Ramone, the small council chamber, turns into a slow, suffocating war of glances and half-truths, with a boy king at its center and a realm balanced on his confusion. The question is not whether this balance can hold, it is which hand will move first to break it, and what new fire that first misstep will unleash. Varys and Littlefinger, two spiders, one freed lion. In that suffocating chamber, as glances sharpen into weapons, two men in the shadows feel the balance shift and quietly take stock. What if Tyrion Lannister, newly spared by Oberyn's victory, is not merely an acquitted lord, but the rarest thing in King's Landing, a lion who has seen the inside of the cage and come back breathing? For Varys, the answer is almost a relief. In the canon of the realm, he remembers a different path. One where he shepherds Tyrion through secret tunnels, hides him in a crate, and sends him across the narrow sea, believing that, away from his father and this poisoned castle, the man might yet serve the realm. Here, that exile is no longer necessary. The same sharp mind, the same capacity for pity and for cruelty, now stands at the small council table with legal authority, a public vindication, and a private reservoir of rage that has not yet found an outlet. He watches Tyrion closely. He notes how the man flinches at Tywin's commands, how he feels neither love nor acceptance from his father, even now, and how this only grows when Cersei's barbed words follow him from council to corridor. Varys remembers the boy who drank to numb himself, who made jests to earn scraps of praise, and he sees instead a figure hardening. As he grows up in this new role, regent in all but name when Tywin is absent, tutor to Tommen, steward of the city's grain and gold, Tyrion continues to prove that he can shoulder responsibilities that others dismiss as beneath them. So, the spider begins to test him. A whispered report about discontent in a nearby village, an accurate but incomplete list of crown debts, a quiet warning that the faith is restless. Each truth is edged, each omission deliberate. Will Tyrion spend his restored authority on brothels and wine, or on food stores and city walls? Will he ask why certain ships vanish from the harbor, or will he be content with the answers Varys offers for now? Littlefinger's reaction is colder. For Peter Baelish, Tyrion's survival is not a reprieve, but a complication. A new variable slotted into a game whose next moves were already arranged. Lysa in the Vale, Sansa hidden, the Iron Throne leveraged through debt and chaos. A dead Tyrion would have left Cersei more isolated, Tywin more distracted, the Lannister line more brittle. A living Tyrion, publicly wronged and privately vengeful, threatens to see patterns in the numbers that others ignore. So, Peter's tests are different. A casually offered ledger showing a minor discrepancy in the royal accounts, a hint that certain gold flows through Casterly Rock without Tywin's knowledge, a murmured suggestion that Shae's betrayal was not as simple as it seemed. He tempts Tyrion with revenge, with vice, with the promise of damning information that could ruin enemies and perhaps even his father. He smiles as he speaks of opportunity, awed of how an heir spurned by his own blood might yet claim his birthright with the right allies. In the end, Tyrion stands between two spiders, each spinning a different future around him. In a city of liars, which liar does he choose to believe? Or does he finally learn to trust no one but himself? King Tommen's court. The hand. Tyrion almost becomes. In the quiet that follows those whispered promises from Varys and Littlefinger, another truth settles over the Red Keep. King Tommen Baratheon is alone on the Iron Throne, and he is a gentle boy in a castle full of wolves. He sits on a chair too large for him, feet not yet touching the floor, while Cersei, Tywin, and the Tyrells circle like rival hawks. Each offers guidance, affection, and praise, but always with a chain hidden behind the smile. Maresheri brings kittens and compliments. Cersei brings fear and warnings. Tywin brings ledgers and lessons on power. The boy hears of enemies everywhere, of responsibilities he barely understands, of a realm that might shatter if he missteps. Into the chamber walks Tyrion, legally acquitted, publicly vindicated, yet still the son his father cannot forgive. He approaches the new king not as a supplicant, not as a rival, but as an uncle who remembers the shy child hiding behind Margaery's skirts. He bows with exaggerated flourish, makes a small jest about the throne being hard on the spine, and watches Tommen's nervous smile flicker into something real. For a moment, the Iron Throne feels less like a weapon and more like an uncomfortable chair in a drafty hall. Tyrion continues to visit him. He speaks of history instead of conspiracies. Out of the small folk in each village who pray for steady seasons more than they pray for victories. He asks Tommen what kind of king he wishes to be, and listens to the halting, honest answers. In those conversations, the boy king feels neither love nor acceptance as a tool, but as something close to genuine concern. This only grows when Tyrion, with careful patience, explains why laws matter, why mercy can be strength, and why a ruler must sometimes say no, even to his own mother. For Cersei, this is intolerable. Every shared joke, every afternoon where Tommen laughs with Tyrion instead of swallowing her stories about a monstrous uncle, feels like a theft. She watches them from the gallery, fingers white on the rail. hearing only the echo of Maggie the Frog's prophecy and the memory of a father who always preferred sharp minds over frightened obedience. As he grows up, Tommen begins to ask questions. Why must the faith be bullied? Why must every whisper be treason? Why must his uncle be kept from counsel when he has already proven his innocence before gods and men? Tywin sees a different danger. A capable son, a legal heir in all but name, sitting at the king's ear and quietly reshaping policy toward pragmatism instead of terror. Tyrion steers Tommen away from mass executions after minor riots, toward grain shipments instead of new gold cloaks, toward negotiation with the Tyrells rather than constant tests of loyalty. The streets calm, the court grumbles. The realm, for a brief season, steadies. And it is precisely this fragile stability that makes Cersei most desperate. Because as long as Tyrion remains close to Tommen, her influence slips like sand through her fingers, and the boy she thought to mold into a weapon begins to look, alarmingly, like his own man. How long before desperation turns to a new plot, a new accusation, a new kind of trial, one that no champion can win for him? Cersei's counterplay. Whisper campaigns and manufactured monsters. So, Cersei answers that unspoken challenge the only way she truly knows how. Not with open steel, but with whispers that cut more deeply than blades. The verdict may have spared Tyrion's life, yet in the Queen's mind, it has only proven that the gods can be bought. Within days, quiet tales begin to circulate through the castle and the city alike, never quite traceable, and always carried by someone's cousin, someone's maid, someone's drinking companion. Tyrion bribed the judges. Tyrion bribed the gods. Tyrion bewitched Oberyn with Dornish poisons and Lysine powders. The mountain did not fall by chance or trial. He fell because the imp, now acquitted and dangerous, had arranged everything from the start. It starts as a murmur in wine sinks and undercrofts, but this only grows when Cersei begins to seed the same doubts among those who matter. A passing remark to a nervous lord about how quickly Oberyn agreed. A sympathetic sigh to a Tyrell cousin, that justice in King's Landing is not what it was under their father. She continues to suggest, never to state, that the man declared innocent is, in truth, more guilty than ever. From there, she reaches for the faith. In the septs of the city, its septons find a new theme in their sermons: hidden evils in high places, serpents cloaked in lion skins, men whose silver tongues can twist law and custom until sin walks free. Cersei does not name Tyrion, she does not have to. A word with a pious septa here, a generous donation to a struggling sept there, and suddenly the cobblestones outside the Red Keep echo with talk that the trial was corrupted, that the gods were mocked, that unseen hands turned the scales. At the same time, she crafts more tangible snares. Tyrion is given new responsibilities that look at first glance like praise. He is tasked with raising fresh levies from the city's craftsmen, with renegotiating taxes on the river trade, with overseeing grain requisitions from a nearby village that has already suffered in the war. And each duty is framed as necessary for Tommen, for the stability of the realm, for the glory of their father. Each duty is calculated to make him appear, to the small folk, as the hand that takes, not the hand that gives. When a levy bites too deep, or a tax falls hard on a poor district, it is Cersei's agents who fan the outrage, and Cersei's soft voice that comforts the aggrieved. The king's uncle is greedy, the king's uncle is cruel, the king's uncle thinks himself the true heir in all but name. Tyrion, however, has lived his entire life beneath the weight of such poison. As he grows up under Tywin's shadow, he feels neither love nor acceptance, only the constant reminder that every misstep will be used against him. So he recognizes the pattern almost at once. Instead of retreating, he walks directly into the spaces Cersei tries to make toxic. He visits the taxed guilds in person, shares their ale, listens to their complaints, and publicly remits or delays payments in cases of hardship. He orders grain released from castle stores when the requisitioned village begins to starve, then makes sure the heralds shout that this mercy comes from the king and his uncle together. In doing so, he turns some of her daggers into his own armor. The sermons about hidden evils become, in the minds of many, a warning against those who accuse too easily. The tales of greed collide with the sight of a Lannister lord walking muddy streets, hearing petitions, dispensing justice with a weary patience that feels more real than any golden crown. And yet, even as he continues to blunt her rumors, Cersei learns a hard lesson. That smears alone cannot bury a man who answers each wound with a visible act of grace. If she wants Tyrion gone, truly gone, she will have to reach beyond whispers and sermons, towards something more direct, more final, and far more dangerous than mere words. The Dornish Gambit, Tyrion, Oberyn, and a Southern alliance. And it is in the echo of that realization, in the hush after Cersei's latest failure, that another possibility begins to take shape. What happens when the man she hates most shares a quiet room with the prince who just saved his life and shamed House Lannister before half the realm? The meeting is arranged under cover of courtesy. Oberyn asks to speak with Tyrion in private, to take his leave before returning to the Water Gardens, and no one in the castle dares deny the man who slew the mountain. The chamber is small, the air still heavy with the memory of chains and accusation, and for a long moment they simply regard one another. The viper in silk, the lion in plain black, both men alive when they were meant to die. Oberyn thanks him first, not for coin, not for titles, but for the chance at justice that the trial by combat provided, even if Tyrion's life was the immediate stake and Alea's the deeper one. The prince speaks of a sister who died screaming in the sack of a city, of children dashed against walls, of a father who heard only silence from Casterly Rock. His voice is soft, but every word is a blade, and Tyrion hears in it a grief that mirrors his own long hunger for acceptance and truth from his own father. Tyrion answers with something rare for him, unadorned gratitude. He acknowledges the debt plainly. Without Oberyn's victory, he would already be a corpse rotting beneath the Red Keep. In a life where he feels neither love nor acceptance from those who should have given both most freely, this survival is no small thing. It creates a bond that is not wine-soaked camaraderie or the brittle loyalty of sellswords, but a shared understanding that Tywin's decisions have shattered more than one family. From that shared wound, terms of cooperation begin to emerge. Tyrion offers what power he has: influence over council agendas, access to Tommen's ear, the ability to shape royal decrees. He speaks of Dorne's long-slighted status, of promises made and left to wither, and vows to argue for fairer treatment of Dornish lords, for trade protections, for respect instead of grudging tolerance. He continues to press a single name as he talks: Myrcella, her safety, her status, her eventual claim if the line of succession ever twists. In return, Oberyn agrees to patience. No open accusations, no public demands for Tywin's head. Instead, a quieter campaign. Tyrion will seek records, witness accounts, anything that ties Alea's murder more tightly to Lannister command. What was once a buried atrocity becomes a bargaining chip, resting in the hands of Tywin's least favored son and a vengeful Dornish prince. This only grows when word of their newfound understanding seeps through the castle. Tywin senses at once that something has shifted. The past he tried to seal behind gold and fear is now a living threat, and it is carried not by enemies at the gate, but by his own heir in all but name. If war or succession crises flare again, if Cersei's paranoia deepens, if Tommen proves weak, or if the Tyrells overreach, Dorne now has a reason to stand behind Tyrion's vision of Westeros over any other Lannisters. And somewhere beyond the narrow sea, a different storm is still gathering, one that will test every fragile alliance he forges in these dark halls. No crossbow in the privy. Tywin Lannister's alternate last act. The storm across the sea gathers, but in the Red Keep, another storm refuses to break. In canon, that storm ends in a privy, a crossbow, and a father dying with his breeches down. Here, Tywin Lannister lives. In the original tale, Tyrion's escape is a descent. Down through torchlit passages, through Varys' whispers, into the dark where Shae lies in his father's bed. The shock is intimate and obscene. Love turned to mockery, acceptance turned to purchase, a father's betrayal made flesh. The quarrel thuds into Tywin's chest, then his gut, and with those bolts the Lannister command structure is decapitated in a single night. The hand dies, the king loses his spine, and the realm begins to rot faster. None of that happens now. Tyrion does not flee through secret tunnels. He walks out the gate in daylight, acquitted before gods and men, watched by half the castle and half the city. There is no quiet hour for Varys to unlock cells, no secret meeting in the Tower of the Hand. Tywin, already stung by defeat, tightens his world like a mailed fist. Guards at his doors double. His chambers become a fortress within the fortress. No whores, no guests. No Shay in his bed to draw a son with murder in his heart. So, Tywin continues his hand. He still attends the small council, still signs the ledgers that keep the Iron Bank at bay. He still leans on the Tyrells for grain, gold, and appearances. But now the man across the table is not a condemned embarrassment waiting to die. He is the son who won in open combat, the heir in all but name, the one the city has just watched defy death itself. As he grows up into this role, Tyrion stands closer to power than ever, and Tywin knows it. The strain tells. The Iron Bank's letters grow colder. Dorne's smiles grow thinner. Cersei's temper, already frayed, snaps more often, her hatred of her brother becoming a constant, poisonous undertone in every council session. Tyrion answers with quiet competence and quieter defiance. Small legal reforms, careful favors to lesser lords, private audiences with those who feel neither love nor acceptance from House Lannister's current queen. This only grows when minor houses begin to treat him as the true center of authority, coming to him before they go to his father. Age does what no rebel host has managed. Tywin's back stiffens, his nights shorten, and the weight of endless responsibilities grinds him down. He cannot openly disinherit Tyrion without shattering the image of Lannister unity. He cannot fully trust him without admitting his own past cruelty. Between Cersei's volatility, Tommen's softness, Dorne's cold watchfulness, and the Iron Bank's ledgers, the old lion is beset on every side. If he does not die by crossbow in a privy, does he instead die by 1,000 political cuts, each one small, deniable, and deliberate? And when that final cut comes, whose hand will truly be on the knife? Cersei's, Dorne's, the Tyrells, or the son who has spent a lifetime learning how to kill a father without ever drawing a blade? Because in this timeline, Tywin Lannister's last act may not be a sudden fall, but a slow, humiliating unmaking. And the first real move toward that unmaking is about to begin. A world without exile. Tyrion never meets Daenerys. The first real move is not a dagger in the dark, but the quiet decision that never gets made. In canon, Tyrion's answer to Tywin's verdict is murder and flight. Here, acquittal chains him to the very city he once escaped through blood. In the world that is known, he kills his father on the privy, frees Jaime, strangles Shay, and vanishes with Varys through hidden passages in the castle. Across the narrow sea, that broken fugitive stumbles through Pentos, through a wine-soaked voyage, and through slavery and spectacle and the stinking fighting pits of Meereen, until a dragon queen pulls him from the gutter and makes him her advisor. That arc is built on exile, on a man who has lost his name, his position, his father, and almost his will to live. Here, none of that happens. Tywin lives. Jaime stays caged in Lannister expectations. Shay's fate is terrible, but it is contained within King's Landing, not used as the final cut that severs Tyrion from Westeros. As he grows up into this new role, publicly vindicated, privately loathed, he feels neither love nor acceptance, but he does feel something else: responsibility. Tommen needs a hand who can speak softly to Margaery, bargain with the Tyrells, and keep Cersei's worst impulses from tearing the realm apart. Tywin cannot simply throw away the son who just survived trial by combat and won the sympathy of half the city. So, Tyrion continues to attend councils instead of slaver auctions. He continues to walk the Red Keep's halls instead of Meereen's pyramids. His roots in the capital run deeper than any ship's anchor. His father still controls Casterly Rock. His name still binds him to the Westerlands, and every rival house watches him as a potential heir, a potential threat, a potential ally. And it is here that the true absence begins. Across the sea, Daenerys Targaryen still breaks chains, still takes Meereen, still drowns in the politics of freedmen, mercenaries, and ancient families who hate her. But there is no Lannister in her throne room now. No man who has memorized the sigils and grudges of half the great houses. No embittered son who can explain Cersei's pride, Tywin's methods, or the quiet terror of famine in a Westerosi village when war drags on too long. Without him, her campaign leans harder on fire and steel. Fewer hostages are traded, fewer marriages proposed, fewer ravens sent with careful poisoned words. When her ships finally reach Westeros, there is no one to say which castles will bend and which will burn, no one to argue for patience when dragonfire could end a problem in a heartbeat. Here is the pattern interrupt. Oberyn's victory feels like mercy. Yet by saving Tyrion for a slower, more political war in King's Landing, the Red Viper may have doomed thousands who, under a better advised Daenerys, would have lived long enough to see a gentler peace. Because in this timeline, the Queen across the sea rises without her strangest, our sharpest counselor, and the cost of that absence has only begun to gather on the horizon. The North remembers. Without Tyrion's shadow. The Queen across the sea rises without him, but in the cold lands beyond the Neck, the game moves to an older rhythm. The North remembers, and it remembers almost without Tyrion's shadow. The Red Wedding still drenches the twins in blood. Robb Stark still dies with a wolf's head sewn to his body, and the banners of the flayed man still rise above Winterfell. These horrors stand far from the Red Keep's marble floors, and for a time, the choices of Tyrion, Tywin, and their southern allies feel distant, almost abstract to those huddled in village and hall beneath gray northern skies. Rose Bolton's treachery, Ramsay's cruelty, the burning of the old castle, all of this unfolds much as before. Because geography itself shields the North from immediate interference. Yet there is a difference, and this only grows when word trickles north that Tywin Lannister still lives. In this timeline, the old lion does not die on a privy at the hand of a broken son. He continues to rule from the capital, with Tyrion legally vindicated and bound, at least in appearance, to his father's will. The Lannister regime remains coherent, focused, and far less vulnerable. Rose Bolton, who in canon moves like a half-independent predator, now feels a tighter leash at his throat. Tywin demands reports, demands hostages, demands proof that his new warden of the North remains loyal. Letters arrive bearing the lion's seal, cool and precise, reminding Roose that his rise depends entirely on southern favor. With a living hand who still commands fear, there is less room for Roose to hedge his bets between Lannister gold and northern resentment. His plots against the remaining Starks become more cautious, his willingness to indulge Ramsay's chaos slightly restrained, not from love or praise for his bastard, but from the cold calculation that any scandal might give Tywin cause to replace him. A stronger King's Landing also changes the man who comes to challenge the Boltons. In the original tale, Stannis Baratheon sails north precisely because the Lannisters seem overextended, their coffers drained, their alliances brittle. Here, with Tywin alive and Tyrion advising Tommen's rule, the Iron Throne projects stability. The Tyrell grain still flows, the Crown's edicts still carry weight, and the chance to fracture the realm feels slimmer. Stannis hesitates. His march to the Wall may be delayed, his gamble on northern loyalty less immediate, because the southern opportunity is not as ripe. And in council chambers lit by pale morning light, Tyrion listens. As he grows up in this harsher court, he feels neither love nor acceptance from his father, but he has learned the value of distant loyalties. When northern envoys speak of burned villages, missing heirs, and the cold hunger beyond the Wall, he does not laugh. He asks questions. He remembers maps. He allows small concessions, relief shipments, a softened tax, a quiet reprimand sent to Rose, that do not save the North, but slightly ease the sense that the South is only a devouring beast. It is not mercy, not really. It is strategy. And then a more just and pragmatic royal advisor understands that a realm held only by fear will crack the moment winter truly falls. So, even where Tyrion is absent in body, the idea of a stronger, more unified Lannister regime hangs over every northern decision. Rose calculates his betrayals with one eye fixed on the capital. Stannis weighs his banners against a foe who no longer limps. Jon Snow, rising at the Wall, senses that the South will not simply collapse under its own corruption. The North still remembers, but now, when it whispers of lions, it whispers of a pride that has not yet torn itself apart. And that single change bends every quiet, desperate choice made in the snow. Because if the South does not weaken on its own, then someone else will have to break it. Faith and fire. Does Tyrion delay Cersei's walk of atonement? Someone will have to break it. And in this timeline, that someone sits on the small council, wine cup in hand, watching his sister reach for wildfire in a sept instead of beneath the city. In canon, Cersei's answer to a stable Tommen and an overmighty Tyrell alliance is simple and catastrophic. She arms the Faith Militant, resurrecting a fanatical order that had slept for centuries, all to harass Margaery, to shame Loras, to bleed Highgarden's influence from the court. At first, it works. The Sparrows raid brothels, seize gold, drag Tyrell retainers from the streets. Then, the tide turns. The High Sparrow turns his gaze on the Queen herself, on her infidelities, on her lies, until the same fanatics she raised are parading her naked through King's Landing. With Tyrion alive, acquitted, and seated beside his father, that path looks far less inevitable. The small council is no longer a hollow echo chamber for Cersei's fears. It is Tywin's iron will, Kevan's caution, and Tyrion's cold arithmetic. As he grows up into these responsibilities, he has learned that religious zealots are cheap to arm and impossible to dismiss. He would lay out the costs in that measured, mocking voice: lost royal authority, emboldened mobs, a precedent that crowns piety over law. Why hand blades to men who answer to the Seven instead of the king? Instead, he continues to reach for the tools he trusts: ledgers, contracts, quiet pressure. If Cersei demands a weapon against the Tyrells, Tyrion offers tariffs on Reach grain, audits of their debts, subtle delays in repaying the Iron Bank that leave Highgarden exposed. He feels neither love nor acceptance from his father, but he does receive a wary, conditional praise when those numbers add up in the Crown's favor. This only grows when Tywin sees that every golden rose in the capital now has a leash of ink and coin, and it is in those council sessions that Cersei's schemes begin to fray earlier. Tyrion knows her patterns, the way she flatters then isolates, the way she whispers of the good of the king when she really means the good of her pride. He can name, in front of Tommen and Tywin, the danger of giving the faith legal autonomy, of letting septons sit in judgment over lords. Each time she reaches for the High Sparrow, he drags her hand back to the account books. Blocked from arming fanatics, Cersei does not become safer. She becomes smaller, meaner, forced into weapons that stain her own hands instead of the city's. Poison in a cup, got a manufactured scandal, a blackmail ledger hidden in some forgotten tower of the castle. These are quieter storms. They ruin lives, not kingdoms. King's Landing, for a time, is spared the spectacle of its queen, shorn and barefoot, its streets patrolled by zealots with cudgels and seven-pointed stars. The Sept remains a place of incense and whispers, not chains and cells. Yet, the root remains. Cersei's paranoia, her hatred of her brother, her willingness to burn everything to hurt her enemies, all of that still coils beneath her lion's mane. Tyrion can delay the fire. He cannot change that his sister keeps reaching for the torch. And when the torch is finally lit, it will not be in the hands of the faith at all, but in the hands of someone far closer to him and far more dangerous. The long game with the Iron Bank, buying time for the living. The torch Cersei reaches for is war and wildfire. Tyrion's in this altered timeline is ledgers and letters sealed with a Braavosi iron coin. In canon, Cersei treats the Iron Bank as an insult rather than an ally. She lets interest mount, ignores envoys, assumes Lannister gold and Lannister terror will be enough. The result is brutal and simple. The Iron Bank turns to Stannis, then only crawls back once Cersei seems dominant again, backing the winning side rather than the stable one. In this world, with Tyrion vindicated and entrenched beside his nephew, that pattern quietly breaks. Tyrion has already seen what unpaid debt does to a village and to a castle, as he grows up watching Tywin squeeze the Westerlands after Robert's rebellion. All he knows, the Iron Throne's ledgers are a battlefield as real as the Blackwater, so he continues to meet every Braavosi representative, not with hauteur, but with a cool, almost disarming candor. He proposes restructuring the Crown's mountain of debt, trading impossible interest for longer terms, partial payments, and something far more radical: access. Instead of shutting Braavos out, he invites Braavosi gold in. Roads from Lannisport to King's Landing, harbor improvements, granaries expanded along the Rose Road and Gold Road. Tyrion frames it all as investment that secures repayment. The Iron Bank gains tariffs and influence. The Crown gains infrastructure and time. This only grows when he quietly diversifies royal revenue, tightening tax collection in the Reach, granting charters to merchant guilds, and curbing the worst corruption in the capital's customs offices. It is not love or praise he seeks from Braavos. He feels neither love nor acceptance in their cold marble halls. What he wants is predictability. Predictable coin, predictable grain, predictable steel. And that predictability has an unintended consequence. It frees resources that, in another story, would have vanished into interest and graft. Then the pattern interrupt arrives in the form of ravens. Fragmented reports from the wall. Wildlings massing. A dead man walking. A hand of a white, black and shriveled. Described in a maester's cramped script. To the south, it sounds like a northern ghost story. To a man who has stared down wildfire on the Blackwater, it sounds like risk. His rational mind resists. And dead men and ice demons do not fit neatly into columns of figures, yet his instinct for hedging, for never betting everything on one throw, will not let it go. He begins almost cautiously to redirect. Extra grain contracts with the Reach. Discreet orders for dragonglass from Dragonstone's old mines. Slightly increased funding for the Night's Watch, buried in broader military appropriations. He does not believe fully, but he prepares partially. And here lies the haunting possibility. The son Tywin nearly disowned, the man almost executed for a crime he did not commit, might become the one who ensures Westeros can afford to fight the enemy no one in King's Landing truly sees yet. A kingdom that does not starve, an army that does not dissolve for lack of pay, a wall provisioned just enough. These are not glorious victories. They are quiet margins. Margins that, when winter finally walks, could mean the difference between a realm that collapses in hunger and chaos and a realm that can still raise its banners for the last war. Love, marriage, and power. Who would dare wed Tyrion now? And in those quiet margins, another question begins to take shape. If Tyrion Lannister walks out of the trial yard alive, vindicated, and indispensable, who in Westeros would dare to bind their house to his fate in marriage? In canon, his father answered that question with brutal clarity. Sansa Stark was dragged from girlhood into a forced union, a red-haired key meant to lock Lannister power onto the north. The logic had been cold but impeccable. A Lannister husband, a Stark bride, and any child between them carrying both the Golden Lion and the Grey Direwolf. A uniting claims to Winterfell and Casterly Rock in a single fragile body. Inside the castle sept, though, that logic felt like a sentence. Sansa trembled, Tyrion drank, and he feels neither love nor acceptance from the bride who cannot even look him in the eye. In this altered timeline, that marriage still hangs over everything as he grows up, but its future becomes far less certain. By the time Oberyn crushes the mountain's skull and the bells toll for Tyrion's acquittal, Sansa may already have vanished into the veil on Littlefinger's arm, transformed from hostage into hidden claimant. If she is gone, she is no longer a girl in a lion's cage, but a rumor in a distant mountain castle. And her value as a pawn shifts from immediate leverage to long-term dangerous possibility. This only grows when Tywin, a force to accept his son's legal innocence, begins to weigh his options. If Sansa cannot be paraded back to court, the old lion will look elsewhere. A lesser Westerlands house hungry for royal favor. A Riverlands survivor desperate for protection. Even a calculated offer to Dorne, some minor Martell cousin tied to the man whose spear just saved Tyrion's life, could all be laid on the table. And if Sansa is ever recaptured, a remarriage, solemnized properly and paraded before the realm, becomes an instrument to erase the memory of chains and accusations, replacing them with a carefully crafted image of reconciliation. Tyrion sees the trap in every one of these options. After Tysha, after the wedding, where his bride shook as if led to execution, marriage has become another cage that his father forges and then calls duty. Thus, he continues to understand its power, its ability to turn distant banners into sworn shields. But the thought of another arranged bed, another pair of frightened eyes avoiding his gaze, curdles any desire for praise or acceptance. Yet power has a gravity of its own. A man who can provision kingdoms and sway trials by combat cannot remain unwed forever in a world built on bloodlines. The The question is not whether he marries, but whether he can ever allow himself to seek genuine love again, or if every potential bride will remain, in his mind, just another piece on the same hateful board Tywin taught him to play. And as Oberyn's victory echoes through court and Dorne watches closely, the answer to that question may decide whether Tyrion's next union binds him to his father's legacy, or arms him with the means to finally destroy it. The slow burn of revenge, Tyrion's quiet, war on Tywin. Tyrion walks out of the yard a living man, but what survives with him is not hope. It is a wound that never closed, only learned to hide beneath wine and wit. In the quiet after Oberyn's victory, when the cheering from the Dornish gallery fades and the castle returns to its wary routines, that wound begins to ache in earnest. He remembers Tasha, the girl in the village lane, remembers being an eager, awkward heir desperate for praise, and how his father turned that love into a weapon. He remembers the gold, the guards, the line of men, and the command to watch. As he grows up, this becomes the moment every other humiliation or slight echoes back to. The core lesson that from Tywin Lannister he feels neither love nor acceptance, only cold, calculated use. Thus, the show trial only proves the lesson was right. His father sat the hand's chair while lies were stacked like kindling, and never once did Tywin's eyes soften. This only grows when Tyrion understands that Tywin was prepared to let him die, not for the realm, not even for Tommen, but for the neatness of a narrative in which the troublesome son pays for every family sin. Open rebellion would be simple, almost merciful. Raise banners, draw swords, die quickly. But Tywin still holds the levers that matter. The gold of the rock, the loyalty of great lords, the legal authority of Hand and Patriarch. Cersei waits for a single misstep, Varys listens behind every wall, and the small council chamber is a pit where one wrong word can be twisted into treason. Tyrion understands that a direct strike would not just fail, it would confirm every story his father tells about him. So, he chooses other weapons. Information, first of all. The ledgers he has memorized, the secrets whispered in brothels, the grudges of merchants and minor knights who come to him because he actually listens. Then, patronage, the scribes promoted for diligence, the jailer whose sick child is quietly paid for, the captain of the city watch who finds his men suddenly better fed. He continues to treat the low-born clerks and petty officials with a fairness that Tywin considers weakness, and the very contempt blinds the father to the network the son is building. Small acts of sabotage follow, so subtle they look like competence. A tax reform that stabilizes Tommen's reign but credits the Tyrell's advice instead of Tywin's. A royal decree that spares a minor Lord Tywin would have crushed, winning a grateful bannerman with 50 spears and a long memory. A loan quietly restructured so that a key lender becomes more dependent on Tyrion's signature than on the Lannister name itself. Each success shifts a grain of sand. Each grateful face in the throne room, each clerk who brings the most sensitive papers to Tyrion first, is another thread in a web his father cannot see from the high seat. Day after day, Tywin wakes believing his authority, unshaken, believing that his youngest son has been chastened by fear and spared only by chance. Yet beneath the polished floors of the Red Keep, in counting rooms, in barracks, in the shadowed corridors between village and castle, the world is being rearranged around him. The question is not whether Tywin will notice, but how late it will be when he finally looks down and realizes that the ground itself now answers to his son. When the lion falters, Tywin's decline and final miscalculation. Tywin does notice. He notices in the only way a man like him can, as a series of irritations, delays, and disobediences that begin to fray the edges of his control long before he admits that his own foundations are cracking. Age comes for him quietly. The Lord of Casterly Rock still rides to council, still dictates letters until the candles gutter, still bears the weight of crown debts and war indemnities on his shoulders. Yet the strain of years of conflict, the endless petitions, the quarrels between daughter and youngest son, all carve lines into his face that even praise from courtiers cannot smooth. His hand trembles once when he seals a decree. He blames the wax, not the weakness. He will not confess that as he grows up into his role as the realm's savior, his body is already beginning to betray him. This only grows when Tommen's reign demands constant compromise. The Iron Throne is held up by Tyrell gold, Braavosi loans, and the brittle pride of a family that feels besieged in its own castle. Tywin responds the only way he understands, by tightening his grip. He continues to centralize power, to strip autonomy from those he does not fully trust. And at the top of that list stands Tyrion. The first overreach is legal. In a quiet session, with only a few witnesses and a tired boy king, Tywin presents a carefully worded document that would, in effect, pass Casterly Rock to Jaime's hypothetical sons, skipping the troublesome heir who feels neither love nor acceptance. It is dressed up as prudence, as ensuring stability. Yet by now, Tyrion's quiet network reaches into the parchment itself. A sympathetic maester alerts Varys. A city watch captain who owes his life to Tyrion delays the signing, and within a day the rumor that Tywin seeks to disinherit his own blood is whispering through both tavern and sept. The second overreach is darker. A boar hunt is arranged outside the city, an echo of Robert's convenient death. The king is kept in the capital. Tyrion is urged to ride. A broken stirrup, a loosened girth, a hedge knight who was paid to look away. On any other day, it might have ended with a broken neck in the mud. Instead, a grateful merchant's guards intervene, and one of the conspirators is taken alive. And it is here that the pattern finally breaks. Instead of a corpse, Tywin receives a confession. Instead of silence, there is a trail of coin that leads, not conclusively, but convincingly, toward his own household. The confrontation does not happen in a privy. It happens in the throne room. Before the Iron Throne, in full court, Tyrion lays out just enough. The disinheritance attempt, the suspicious hunt, the payments routed through shell accounts in Lannisport. Varys adds a soft word, a ledger appears in the hands of a city watch officer, and the Tyrells stand very still, weighing how much longer their fortunes should be tied to a man who arranges accidents for his kin. Tywin is forced for the first time to justify himself in the open. He speaks of duty, of discipline, of an ungrateful son who threatens everything he has built, yet every word exposes the rot beneath the marble. As Dorne watches and remembers Elia, Margaery measures Tommen's flinch. Even Jaime, torn between father and brother, cannot entirely look away from what is being revealed. Whether Tyrion has orchestrated every step or merely loosened the stones is left deliberately unclear. What matters is that the old lion's aura of inevitability is broken. Once that shatters, others can finally move. A Dornish envoy withholding support. A Tyrell lord refusing another loan. A Kingsguard knight choosing brother over father. Tywin does not fall in a single night, but from this moment his decline is irreversible. The realm has seen him bleed. And in a court that survives on perception, that is often the first and fatal wound. The question that lingers as the echoes of that throne room confrontation fade is simple. When the lion finally stumbles, who will be ready to claim the carcass, and who will Tyrion choose to feed? A different kind of hand. Could Tyrion rule the realm? In that quiet after Tywin's public stumble, the true question is not only who will feast on the lion's carcass, but what happens if the smallest lion learns to rule the jungle? What if Tyrion Lannister, legally vindicated and impossible to ignore, becomes the one hand that can still close around the throat of the realm? The shift begins almost invisibly. Tyrion walks out of his cell not as a condemned kinslayer, but as the man whom the gods themselves, through trial by combat, have declared innocent. In a castle that lives on rumor, this matters. The same courtiers who whispered that he murdered Joffrey now remember the wildfire at Blackwater, the grain shipments he secured, the gates he kept closed when Stannis came. As he grows up in this altered court, he feels neither love nor acceptance from his father, but he no longer needs them to survive. Tywin tries at first to contain him. The old lion still holds the office of hand, still commands the great houses, still believes that fear and gold can solve anything. Yet the machinery of rule has been shaken. Cersei's rage makes her reckless. Jaime's divided loyalties make him hesitant. And only Tyrion seems to understand how coin, grain, garrisons, and gossip all fit together. This only grows when Tywin's health begins to fail, and long nights leave him too weary to sit every council. Varys, ever watchful, continues to feed Tyrion quiet truths. Which guild is near revolt? Which captain is stealing? Which village has not seen a tax collector in months? The Tyrells, counting ships and harvests, prefer the proven administrator who saved their alliance at Blackwater over a drunken queen mother ruled by fear. Step by step, the small man with the sharp tongue becomes the indispensable voice at the table, the one Tommen actually listens to when numbers and lives are at stake. When Tywin finally falls, whether by age, sudden illness, or a quiet arrangement that leaves no crossbow in a privy, there is a vacuum. Cersei reaches for the hand's chain out of wounded pride. Mace Tyrell reaches for it out of vanity. But the ledgers, the city watch, and half the merchants of King's Landing already answer, in practice, to Tyrion. His legal vindication, his record in war, and his network of allies make him the least dangerous choice for a frightened regent, and the most logical one for a cautious council. As Hand, his rule looks nothing like Cersei's would. He cuts through grandiose schemes and empty prophecies, focusing instead on roads repaired, harbor fees standardized, and loans quietly restructured with the Iron Bank. He is skeptical of ideology, contemptuous of crusades, determined above all to avoid another war that would burn the fields before they can be taxed. He continues to push for sewers, granaries, and watch rotations rather than statues and tournaments. Yet his blind spots remain. His cynicism makes him underestimate the pull of the faith, the way a hungry city clings to simple certainties. His personal grudges color his judgment towards certain houses. He is slow to forgive those who mocked him as an heir in name only. A quick-to-cut favor from men who once sought Tywin's praise by belittling the son who handled their petitions. Still, picture the small council chamber some years later. The boy king, or the young man Tommen has become, sits the Iron Throne, but it is Tyrion who holds the painted table in his mind. Quills scratch, candles gutter, ravens come and go. The hand's heavy chain rests on his shoulders, wine cup in his fingers, eyes fixed on maps of river and road and restless border. At last, he wields the power his mind was always shaped for. And in the quiet between orders, he alone measures the cost in blood, in broken families, in a father's corpse that never granted love, and knows that every choice from here will either justify that price or prove that none of it was worth the realm he has saved. The cost of survival, who dies? Because Tyrion lived, he has measured the cost in maps and numbers. Now the story has to measure it in bodies. In canon, Tyrion's escape from the Black Cells is a bloody birth. Tywin dies on the privy, Shae dies with a chain around her throat, and the Lannister line loses the only father who could still command the great houses by reputation alone. His flight across the narrow sea leads him to Daenerys, and as he grows up into her most prominent Westerosi advisor, more deaths gather in his shadow. Myrini's nobles crucified or burned, the sons of the Harpy strangled in cellars, and nameless freedmen trampled when dragonfire and politics collide. Here, that path never opens. Oberyn's victory has already freed him, and Tywin remains alive behind his desk in the Hand's Tower, still writing letters. He's still arranging marriages, still denying his son both praise and true responsibilities. Shae, never betrayed to a kangaroo court, is dismissed and quietly shipped out of the city, more a scar on Tyrion's pride than a corpse on his conscience. The Myrinese elite who died in the wake of his council in canon now live a little longer, plotting and bleeding in a different pattern, because the man who once tried to balance Daenerys' justice with restraint never reaches her side at all. The contrast in King's Landing is stark. With Tywin alive and a legally vindicated Tyrion at court, Cersei's paranoia has less room to bloom into full madness. The faith militant still waits in the wings, but the alliance with the Tyrells is managed with a firmer hand. The crown's debts are not left to rot, and the city feels less like a tinderbox. There is less license for fanatics to arm themselves, fewer small folk dragged from village and alley in the name of the Seven, and perhaps no naked queen walking the streets while crowds howl for humiliation instead of justice. Yet, this only grows when the story turns back to Daenerys. In Slaver's Bay, the absence of a moderating, skeptical voice leaves her more alone with her dragons and her rage. She continues to answer treachery with spectacle, to see compromise as weakness, to burn rather than bargain. Without a cynical Westerosi counselor urging patience, the masters of Yunkai and Astapor may die in greater numbers, their cities hammered flat under dragonfire, their slaves freed, but their streets choked with ash, Missandei and Grey Worm stand closer to that fire, their queen less inclined to listen, and may throw them into harsher campaigns, grinding down the Unsullied against walls that could have been taken by treaty. Even Jon Snow's distant fate trembles. When Daenerys finally turns her gaze west, she comes not as a would-be queen seeking acceptance, but as a conqueror who has already learned that fear works. So, is one man's survival worth the altered suffering of thousands, in a world where he feels neither love nor acceptance from the father whose life he preserves? The tale refuses an easy answer, and the next turn of it will show just how far that unseen ledger can tilt when dragons at last cross the sea. Tyrion versus Cersei, the final sibling showdown. That unseen ledger does not stay abstract for long. It takes the familiar shape of a golden lioness in a black gown and the name Cersei Lannister. As he grows up, Tyrion's first memories of his sister are not of comfort, but of claws. The same golden hair, the same green eyes, the same father. Yet from childhood, she teaches him that blood is not enough. She mocks his studies, sneers at his attempts at swordplay. And when Tywin withholds praise from them both, she turns her hunger for acceptance into cruelty aimed downward. He feels neither love nor acceptance from her, only that cold, assessing gaze that measures what can be used and what must be destroyed. This only grows when Joffrey is born. Cersei wraps all her thwarted love and fear into that boy. And every time Tyrion corrects the prince, slaps him, or reins him in, another mark is carved into their shared ledger. When Joffrey dies at his wedding, her grief becomes a weapon. She names Tyrion Kinslayer and Kingslayer in all but title, hisses poison into Tommen's ear, and unleashes whisper campaigns that paint Tyrion as a secret usurper of Casterly Rock, a false heir waiting to steal the castle and the crown. In response, Tyrion continues to move in shadows. He places loyal clerks in the counting houses, feeds Varys half-truths, and quietly rescues those Cersei would crush. A dismissed septa here, a dismissed guard there, small lives that remember. Years of this push and pull turn King's Landing into a board where every rumor, every missing coin, every vanished witness traces back to either lion. The triggering spark comes almost by accident. A wine merchant in the city, ruined by one of Cersei's schemes, sells a cask meant for Tyrion's table to the wrong buyer. The taster dies foaming at the mouth. The cupbearer loses his sight. And in the panic, a ledger book surfaces, payments from Coyburn, coded notes about the Imp, references to wildfire stores once meant for the Hand's chambers. Tyrion finally has proof that his sister has tried to kill him under their father's very roof. He does not go to her with swords. He goes with parchment. In the throne room, before Tommen, before the Tyrells, before half the court that once laughed at his chains, he lays out the evidence, the poison, the pyromancers, the falsified ledgers. Yet the confrontation is not merely legal, it is a reckoning of a lifetime. He speaks of their mother's death, of Tysha, of how Tywin's coldness turned them into rivals instead of allies. She spits back that he stole Jaime, stole father's brief moments of pride, stole Joffrey. Their words cut deeper than any blade. In the end, Tommen cannot order his mother's death. Instead, Cersei is stripped of regency, confined by the very laws and faith she once twisted. Her movements watched, her wine rationed, her influence bled away, until she becomes a bitter shadow haunting a single tower while the world moves on without her. Tyrion's victory is absolute and utterly joyless. Leaving the hall, hearing the distant sound of a door bolting shut on his sister, he understands that he has won against someone shaped by the same father, the same absence of love, the same hunger for praise. The ledger is balanced in his favor at last, yet the weight on his chest only grows, and the next choice before him is whether to spend what remains of his soul on saving a realm that never wanted him at all. The North and the Dragon Queen meet a different South. What happens when the Dragon Queen and the King in the North finally look south and do not find a mad lioness amid ashes, but Tyrion Lannister quietly holding a realm together? That is the question hanging over Westeros as word of White Walkers and winged fire reaches a capital that has not yet burned. In the canon tale, Jon Snow and Daenerys Targaryen sail toward a city scarred by wildfire, religious war, and Cersei's desperate paranoia. Septons hanged, the great sept shattered, streets half-emptied by famine and fear. Here, the same walls stand, the same red stone of the castle looms over the same crowded alleys, but the scars are different. There has been no wildfire holocaust, no annihilation of the faith, no shambling walk of shame. Instead, there is a quieter brutality. Full granaries guarded by gold cloaks, beggars pressed against the gates. A city more stable, but still deeply unequal, humming on the edge of unrest. Tyrion has spent years as Tommen's principal hand, and as he grows up in that office, he continues to treat governance as another ledger to be balanced. Grain from the Reach, loans renegotiated, guilds flattered and bound with new charters. He has held the worst chaos at bay, yet he feels neither love nor acceptance from the crowds whose lives he has kept from collapse. This only grows when ravens from the north begin to speak of dead men walking and a dragon queen gathering freedmen and Dothraki. Daenerys comes expecting a mad queen, a Lannister tyrant who burned her way to power. Instead, when her ships anchor off Blackwater Bay under banners of three-headed dragons and wolves, she is invited not to a dungeon, but to a hall where a sardonic man with her father's murder etched into his memory waits at the foot of the Iron Throne. Tyrion knows her family history better than she does. He has read every account of Aerys, Rhaegar, and the Trident. Yet, he has never seen her face, never heard the cadence of Valyrian on her tongue until this moment. Jon Snow stands at her side, and his reaction is quieter, more personal. Years ago, a sharp-tongued Lannister visited a frozen outpost and spoke to a lonely bastard about armor made of truth. Now that same man is one of the most powerful figures in the realm, hand to a boy king, master of a castle that once seemed impossibly distant. Jon sees the difference in the cut of Tyrion's cloak, in the deference of lords around him, but also the same weary intelligence in his eyes. Negotiations do not begin with threats, but with arithmetic. Tyrion lays out the numbers. How many men remain in the Reach? How thinly Lannister forces are stretched? How much coin is left in the vaults? He argues for compromise and shared rule, for a marriage or a regency council that would place Daenerys beside Tommen rather than over his corpse, to avoid another Targaryen conquest that the realm cannot survive. Daenerys listens, torn between the birthright that drove her across deserts and a path that offers fewer chains, fewer pyres. Jon presses the danger from the north, and Tyrion, remembering the boy at the wall, does not laugh. Whether this meeting becomes the foundation of a peaceful transition, or only delays an inevitable slide into fire and blood, remains uncertain. Prophecy whispers in Daenerys' dreams. Ego coils in every great house, and the trauma that shaped Tyrion, Cersei, and the Dragon Queen has not vanished. The board is different, the piece is less broken, but the game is the same, and the next move may decide if the capital sees dragons as saviors or executioners. Winter's Reckoning. Does Tyrion help Westeros survive the dead? And beyond dragons and burning cities, another shadow gathers. Whispers begin as distant reports, half-believed tales carried by tired ravens from a frozen frontier most courtiers barely remember. A wildling king breaching the wall, dead men who do not stay dead. Jon Snow's letters, blunt and urgent. They speak of White Walkers and an oncoming winter that will not end. At first, in the warm halls of the capital, it sounds like madness, but Tyrion has heard madness before and seen it prove true. He remembers Stannis, the way his father dismissed the Baratheon fleet until it was almost too late, the way the Blackwater nearly swallowed the city whole. He remembers how wildfire, once a joke about old pyromancers, became the only thing between Tommen's throne and ruin. As he grows up into a man surrounded by courtiers who laugh at distant threats, he carries the scars of every danger that was underestimated. This only grows when Jon's letters are followed by grimmer ones from the Night's Watch, and then by tales brought south by broken northern lords seeking grain, steel, and a hearing. In council, others scoff, though as Cersei calls it, northern superstition. Some Tyrell men speak only of harvests and tariffs, but Tyrion continues to press. He has spent years untangling Lannister debts, rebuilding royal credit, forcing the Iron Bank into negotiated schedules instead of quiet knives in the dark. Those same reforms now become weapons against the cold. Grain stores are expanded under the guise of the price control. Old, half-abandoned castles near the neck and along key roads are quietly refortified, their garrisons increased a little each season. Gold that might have gone to tournaments and feasts becomes stone, iron, and salted meat. He feels neither love nor acceptance from most of the great lords he must convince. But he does not need their affection, only their fear and their coin. He drafts new levies that standardize equipment. He insists on centralized armories in major river and crownlands towns, and pushes for messenger relays that can carry word from the north to the capital in days instead of weeks. To many, it looks like an overabundance of caution from a man still haunted by the Blackwater. To Tyrion, it is simply refusing to make the same mistake twice. There is a grim irony in it. A man nearly killed by a rigged trial now spends his nights ensuring that even Cersei, even Tywin's old allies, even nameless villagers in some forgotten village by a crumbling tower, have a chance to live through the long night he increasingly believes is coming. His father's lessons about responsibilities and rule twist into something else. Not glory, not praise, but survival. He does not expect gratitude. He expects only that his preparations will be needed. It's end when winter finally breaks over the realm, when the dead push past the neck and the war in the north spills southward, those quiet decisions harden into walls that do not fall in the first assault, into armies that do not starve after the first march, into a capital that can, at last, send real aid instead of empty words. On a bitter night, he stands upon a battlement, breath fogging in the air, watching pale shapes crash against defenses he helped keep standing. He is no great warrior, no shining heir with a blade of Valyrian steel. He is simply the mind that made this last, fragile stand possible. And as the dead climb and the living scream, another question rises before him in the dark, one that will demand a choice even colder than the wind. In From Monster to Architect, how Tyrion redefines Lannister legacy. The choice he makes on that frozen battlement does not only decide a single battle, it decides what the word Lannister will mean after the dead are gone, after dragons have passed, after songs forget half the truth. In the known canon, that word curdles. Tywin dies on a privy, crossbow bolt in his gut, his legend leaking away with him. Cersei ends as rubble beneath the Red Keep she tried to save through wildfire. Jaime burns in the streets of King's Landing, a night without a king, consumed by the queen he could not quit. Tyrion wanders in exile, half believed, half hated, the supposed curse of his house, not its heir. The lion's roar becomes a whisper of ash, debt, and broken oaths. Here, the pattern fractures earlier. Aena Oberyn's victory keeps Tyrion alive long enough for his mind to matter. Tywin's fall still comes, but not as a sordid joke in a privy. It comes as a political reckoning, exposed in council chambers and ravens, undone by the very systems of law, an account he once wielded like knives. Cersei is checked before she can reach for wildfire, ring-fenced by legal constraints, by a Kingsguard less pliant, by a brother who understands that her chaos would destroy not only a city, but the fragile order he continues to build around Tommen. Jaime's redemption bends another way, as he grows up into a man no longer defined only by that single mad king and that single broken vow. He rides not toward one last doomed embrace, but toward garrisons, river crossings, and burned villages, seeing firsthand what Lannister power has done. Or this only grows when Tyrion quietly sends him reports from the Westerlands, ledgers of famine averted, lists of small folk spared, letters from a village reeve praising a just ruling from Casterly Rock. For in this version, the rock itself changes. Tyrion becomes its enduring face, not as a drunken embarrassment, but as a patient architect. He revises taxation so that levies fall less heavily on the poorest farmers and more on the great mines and merchant houses that actually profit. He feels neither love nor acceptance from his father's memory, but he uses Tywin's old ledgers as blueprints for something colder and fairer. Fewer brutal reprisals, more negotiated settlements. Fewer burned fields, more grain loans in lean winters. Among minor lords and commoners, the Lannister name stops meaning inevitable punishment and starts meaning grim stability. Pragmatic alliances replace Tywin's brittle dominance. Instead of squeezing the reach in Dorne, Tyrion courts them, trading hostages for marriages, insults for shipping rights. In council, he is no one's favorite, but everyone's necessary man. The irony is brutal. the son Tywin despised for shaming the family, becomes the one who ensures its survival, and not through terror, but through a softer, more sustainable power. The larger lesson is stark. Sometimes a legacy built on fear can only be redeemed when the person it tried hardest to erase is allowed to rewrite the story. And as the dead recede and the living count their losses, that is the question that will haunt every lord who still whispers the name Lannister. What happens when the monster becomes the architect of the future? The man who lived, Tyrion's personal, ending in this timeline. In the years that follow, that question slowly turns into a man. Picture Tyrion Lannister in his late 50s, hair gone thin and gray at the temples, scarred face lined not just by battle, but by long nights over ledgers and maps. He sits in a quiet solar that once belonged to his father, a decanter half finished at his elbow, and thinks back to the Red Keep's yard. The day Oberyn did not slip, the day the mountain fell, the day he stopped begging for Tywin's praise and began, almost in spite of himself, to live for something else. As he grows up into that older man, the memory of the trial is not triumph, but a hinge. Or before it, every clever quip, every well-kept account, every victory in the shadows bends toward one impossible goal, to be seen as a true heir, not a mistake that killed Joanna. After it, when the god's judgment leaves him alive and legally vindicated, he feels neither love nor acceptance from his family, only fear and calculation. This only grows when his reforms keep King's Landing from tearing itself apart in the hungry winters that follow. Companionship is harder. Shay's betrayal and Tisha's ghost linger like another scar under the skin. He continues to take lovers, brief and carefully distant, but something in him flinches from vows. There are friends, though, of a Westerosi kind, a gruff captain of the City Watch who remembers the year the granaries stayed full, a former street urchin turned master of drains and wells, who calls him "my lord" with an affection that has nothing to do with gold, a Dornish envoy who drinks with him once a year and toasts Oberyn's name without hatred. These are not songs. These are the small, quiet victories that come to matter more than any title. A city that does not starve when the seas freeze and the roads are choked with snow. A gentle boy king who dies in his sleep at 50, his children and grandchildren around him, instead of screaming on a spike while a mob howls. Village children who grow up knowing their father's tempers but not their fists, because a certain hand of the king made it ruinous for lords to beat small folk to death and call it justice. Yet, the old habits never leave him. The wine still flows too easily. The jokes still bite too hard. On the nights when the Tower of the Hand feels too much like the old castle where his father judged him, he drinks until the candles blur, then wakes with the familiar taste of self-loathing. He sabotages chances at personal peace, even as he crafts a safer realm for others, pushing away those who come too close, convincing himself that responsibilities are all he deserves. And still, he lives. In this timeline, there is no crossbow in the privy, no patricide, no flight across the narrow sea to become a broken advisor to a dragon queen. There is only the long, unglamorous labor of ruling, of outlasting every enemy, even the ones that share his blood. When his hand finally trembles too much to sign decrees, he retires not in disgrace, but in a kind of wary respect. His ending is not neat. There is no perfect happiness, in no great love that heals every wound. But in a land where most men of power die screaming, Tyrion Lannister grows old with his conscience mostly intact, knowing that the monster his father feared became something rarer, a man who remembered and chose differently. Zooming out, how one duel rewrote an entire continent. And that is the quiet irony at the heart of this timeline. The man Tywin tried to break becomes the one who keeps the realm from shattering entirely. To see it clearly, the story has to step back to that single, brutal afternoon in the Red Keep's yard. Oberyn does not slip. He does not gloat. The spear bites deep, again and again, until Ser Gregor Clegane dies not as a half-remembered rumor in Qyburn's cellars, but as a condemned butcher in full view of King's Landing. Amidst the crowd watches a Prince of Dorne walk away wounded but alive, a Lannister enemy vindicated, and Tyrion Lannister legally, publicly, undeniably innocent. From that moment, the lines of power twist. Tyrion walks free under the same walls that were meant to hold him until execution. Cersei rages, but rage has to bow before law. Tywin swallows the defeat like poison, forced into an uneasy coexistence with the son he tried to erase. In council chambers and in shadowed corridors, father and heir circle each other, each too useful and too dangerous to discard. Tyrion continues to serve as master of coin, but now every ledger and every loan is a quiet reminder that the man Tywin despises is also the man keeping the crown solvent. In the medium term, those numbers matter more than pride. Tommen's reign, buttressed by a competent regent and a brother who understands both debt and hunger, does not slide so easily into chaos. The faith militant still whispers, still gathers strength, but the crisis is delayed or blunted. When bread reaches the village before sermons turn to riots, when Tyrell gold and Lannister credit are managed instead of squandered. Tywin dies later, not on a privy bolt in sudden humiliation, but after a long, grinding effort to keep control, leaving behind a Lannister regime that lasts longer and governs with a colder, steadier hand. As he grows up into that role, Tyrion feels neither love nor acceptance from his father, yet he is bound to the red and gold all the same. This only grows when winter begins to truly bite. In the far distance, Daenerys Targaryen advances without the one Westerosi counselor who might have softened her hand. There is no sellsword captain with mismatched eyes to teach her the language of the narrow sea, no bitter exile to warn against dragonfire as policy. Her campaign, when it finally turns west, is harsher, less patient, more inclined to burn first and reckon later. So, the long game changes. The South meets winter with stronger granaries and more disciplined garrisons, but also with a king more sheltered, a court more insular, and a dragon queen less inclined to compromise. Every time someone thinks Tyrion can be treated as a disposable piece, the game itself bends instead. From Oberyn's spear, to Tommen's stability, to the very shape of Daenerys' war. Is this world truly better than the one that bled its way across the page? Or only differently broken? The answer waits in the next turn of the board, where one last decision will decide whether Tyrion's careful repairs hold, or whether everything he built becomes the perfect kindling for dragonfire. Was Tyrion's survival a blessing or a curse for Westeros? So, was this the moment Westeros was saved, or only the moment its doom learned better manners? On the surface, this altered board looks gentler, with Tyrion alive, acquitted, and restored as his father's most effective servant. The South bleeds less. King's Landing does not stagger from one wildfire of incompetence to another. Instead, Tommen's reign settles into something resembling order. Fewer lords are dragged into pointless feuds. Fewer villages burn for Cersei's wounded pride, and the realm's grain, gold, and garrisons are managed by the one Lannister who understands that a stable tax base is worth more than a glorious massacre. This only grows when Tywin, forced to recognize the son he tried to discard, begins to lean on him. Tyrion's reforms in the City Watch, his insistence on repairing roads and harbors, his quiet arrangements with the Tyrells and the Faith, all create a kingdom less distracted by petty chaos. As he grows up into this role, he continues to redirect resources northward, arguing for scouts on the wall, for dragon glass, for ravens to every castle that will listen. In a world where Daenerys still gathers dragons across the sea, a coherent southern government offers at least a chance of coordinated resistance to both ice and fire. Yet the cost of this stability is written in different blood. A more competent capital means Daenerys faces a realm that does not collapse on contact. It forces her into harder choices. No wildfire to shock her, fewer mad kings and queens to justify every atrocity. So, to break this Westeros, she must become sharper, colder, more willing to make examples of those who resist. Slaver's Bay taught her that mercy is expensive. King's Landing, well run, teaches her that hesitation is fatal. And there is a darker irony. Some of canon's worst monsters are only stopped because everything falls apart. Cersei's own spirals, Joffrey's death, Tywin's murder on the Privy. These disasters prune the deadliest branches of House Lannister. Here, Tyrion's survival means his father lives longer, rules more effectively, and crushes foes who, in another life, would have killed him. And is Tywin's extended rule worth the lives he might save through stability? Or does every spared village simply pay its tithe to a colder tyranny, The ledger refuses to balance cleanly. A gentler King's Landing may demand a harsher Daenerys. A vindicated son may mean a father who never faces judgment. Tyrion, who feels neither love nor acceptance but finally wins praise for his brilliance, becomes the hinge on which mercy and ruthlessness trade places. His survival also wounds the story's old fatalism. In the original tale, his wit and compassion earn only exile, chains, and a crossbow in his hands. Here, those same virtues are allowed to scale, into policy, into alliances, into a realm that half remembers justice. Does that feel like justice or a tempting illusion? That the next section will linger on that temptation, why these imagined paths call so strongly, and what that hunger reveals about the way this audience clings to stories of broken heirs, brutal fathers, and the fragile hope that one different choice could mend them. Why this what if? Hurts. Tyrion, injustice, and our need for rewrite. That temptation hurts because it exposes something raw. It is not only the realm that failed Tyrion Lannister, it is the story itself, bending again and again toward humiliation, loss, and a justice that never quite arrives. As he grows up in the shadow of Casterly Rock, Canon Tyrion reaches always for his father's praise and finds only contempt. He wins battles, he saves a city, he navigates the poisonous corridors of the Red Keep, and still he feels neither love nor acceptance. This only grows when the narrative begins stripping away the few fragile connections he has left. Shay's betrayal, Tywin's loathing made naked, the crossbow in the privy that feels less like triumph and more like a man finally breaking under a lifetime of being misjudged. So imagining him winning the trial by combat is not a trivial adjustment. It is an act of resistance against that weight of injustice. In this vision, Oberyn does not slip, does not gloat, does not give the mountain the heartbeat he needs. Steel bites deep, bone shatters, and the arena hears one clear verdict. Tyrion Lannister is innocent. The same system that tried to grind him into dust is, for once, forced to bow its head and admit it was wrong. The power of that image reaches far beyond the castle yard. A son stands in front of his father and is not condemned. Yet not dismissed, not quietly erased for the convenience of the family name. In a life where every talent has been weaponized or ignored, he continues to exist in the open, legally vindicated, no longer the designated scapegoat. That reversal speaks to anyone who has lived under a father, a mother, a lord, or an institution that only notices value when it can be exploited. Because beneath the armor and the banners, this is a story about being trapped in rooms that refuse to see what a person is, the small council chamber that mocks his warnings, the courtroom that twists his grief into proof of guilt, the bedroom where Shay calls him my lion until it is more profitable to call him monster in front of the throne. For many, that feels uncomfortably familiar. Workplaces that steal credit, families that dismiss every achievement, all villages and cities where difference is tolerated only when it is useful. Alternate histories like this become a kind of emotional repair. They do not simply shift plot mechanics. They offer characters like Tyrion, the hearings, the second chances, the earned mercies that were denied on the page. A vindicated trial by combat becomes a fantasy of retroactive fairness, a chance to watch the broken heir stand upright in the same hall that once tried to destroy him. And as this what-if unfolds, it quietly invites a mirror. Which moments of misjudgment, which lost chances, which unspoken defenses echo in this hunger to rewrite his fate? The next and final section will turn fully toward that reflection and toward the comment section where those personal what-ifs wait to be named. Whereas from cold open to final reckoning, recapping Tyrion's new life. So this then is one answer to the question that opened the tale. What if Oberyn Martell never slipped, never gloated, and simply crushed the mountain's skull? The yard falls silent as Gregor's body spasms and goes still, and with that clean, brutal kill, Tyrion's death sentence evaporates. He walks out not as a condemned kinslayer, but as a man the gods have ostensibly spared, a man the small folk whisper about in the streets between the village and the castle, half in awe and half in fear. Tywin must swallow the verdict. Cersei must watch the brother she hates step past her, legally untouchable, framed by wildfire green torchlight and the murmurs of acceptance he has never heard before. From there, each pivot reshapes the board. If Tywin's first instinct is still control, if he cannot erase this son, he will exploit him. Responsibilities multiply: the city's accounts, the royal fleet, the food stores that keep King's Landing from tearing itself apart. Tyrion takes them all because as he grows up, he has learned that work is the only arena where his father's praise might flicker into existence. This only grows when Oberyn, bound now by victory and by shared hatred of Tywin's old crimes, becomes a wary ally rather than a martyred symbol. And it is during one of these late councils that another axis turns. The Tyrells watch the new hand-in-all-but-name balance ledgers, soothe lords, and shield Tommen. Margaery smiles, Olenna calculates, and slowly an arrangement forms. Lannister gold and Tyrell grain, Ironbank credit and Reachman's ships, all woven by the one Lannister who listens. He continues to broker, to mediate, to turn Cersei's open venom into something that looks like stability. Because he wins the Ironbank early, the faith never fills the vacuum. There are no sparrows armed in the streets, no walk of atonement, no sept-turned battlefield. The war that comes is less about fanaticism and more about succession, about which lion will rule the rock when Tywin finally stumbles. That downfall is political, not bloody. Debts called in, secrets exposed, alliances fraying until the old lion's legend cracks and the realm begins to see another heir standing in his shadow. Across the narrow sea, the absence is louder than any speech. There is no bitter exile in Pentos, no road that bends Tyrion toward Daenerys, no quick alliance between Dragon Queen and Westerosi Turncloak. Her wars in Slaver's Bay burn differently, slower, with fewer Westerosi names in her councils and more hard compromises on the ground. When she finally looks west, the map she faces is not the one remembered from canon. Instead, Westeros has a Lannister legacy rewritten around the son who refused to die. Tyrion's arc bends from broken prisoner to reluctant player, then further still, into a quiet architect of a realm that is only slightly less cruel, yet measurably more sane. He feels neither love nor acceptance from his father, even at the end, but he has levers to pull, bannermen who trust him, small folk who remember the day grain arrived when it should not have. And as this alternate life closes its circle, it remains only one vision, one path where a single clean blow in the sand saved a single man in chains. And that man, in turn, saved thousands from famine, from fanaticism, from pointless fire. What other paths branch from this epic moment? What if Oberyn had lived but turned away? What if Tywin had chosen open war with his own son? What if Daenerys had reached for him anyway across the sea? The final section will turn to those branching roads, and to the uncomfortable question of what each chosen version reveals. Your turn at the table. How would you rewrite Tyrion's fate? Those branching roads do not end with one spared life or one averted famine. They widen, twist, and turn back on themselves, and at each fork another hand could have seized the reins of fate. The trial yard is only the beginning. The true divergence waits in the quiet moments after the cheering stops. Imagine the same hall where Tyrion once stood condemned, Way now forced to acknowledge his innocence. In this version, Tywin does not turn away in cold dismissal. He rises, studies his son, and in front of court and king, he steps close and places a hand on Tyrion's shoulder. A public embrace, a spoken word of praise, a formal recognition of an heir who has finally proven his worth. As he grows up in that altered memory, does Tyrion still sharpen every thought into a weapon? Or does a single gesture of acceptance blunt the edge of his hatred? Or the scene fractures another way? Oberyn wins, the mountain falls, and before the dust settles, the Dornish prince points his spear not at Gregor's corpse, but at the hand of the king. He demands Tywin's arrest for Elia and her children, demands justice in front of king, court, and faith. In that instant, the castle becomes a cage, every Lannister a potential prisoner, every bannerman forced to choose between father and law. In such a world, who walks out of King's Landing with power still in hand? From there, the questions only grow sharper. If Tyrion lives with his name cleared and his mind unbroken, who stands beside him in the years that follow? Does he accept a political marriage to a Tyrell, to a Martell, to some quiet daughter of a Westerlands house who once watched him dispense justice in a village square? Or does he continue to chase the shadow of a lost girl, refusing love because he feels neither love nor acceptance within his own bloodline. This only grows when the eastern winds are considered. With Tywin alive and forced to keep his clever son close, does Tyrion ever flee across the narrow sea at all? Or does Daenerys hear of a lion who advises her through ravens and rumors instead of sharing her deck and her fire? If paths do cross, is he envoy, hostage, or kingmaker, unburdened by patricide? And if Tywin survives in this world, should Tyrion have killed his father, after all, trading one more sin for the chance at a different peace? Beyond personal vengeance lies the longer winter. In this altered realm, does a more stable Lannister regime, a living Oberyn, or a humbled Tywin leave Westeros better prepared for the White Walkers than in the known tale? Or does every compromise and every spared life leave the realm softer, slower, less willing to sacrifice when the dead finally march? Each chosen answer reveals something. Some will bend the story toward justice, others toward ruthless competence, and others toward chaos, or simply more time in the light for favored faces. The comment fields below become, in that sense, more than reactions. They become a standing writer's room, an ongoing council where alternate timelines of Westeros are drafted, argued, and reshaped. The next section will step back from this table and speak to all those unwritten roads, and to the stories still waiting beyond this single what if. If you want more broken timelines and fixed fates, and beyond this one road where Oberyn does not fall and Tyrion walks away from the yard alive, there are so many other paths where a single step lands differently and the whole realm tilts with it. What if the Dragon Queen chose another fire, another mercy, another ending for her long march toward the Iron Throne? In one unwritten tale, Daenerys stands in the throne room of the Red Keep and turns from ash to restraint, claiming the city without burning it, forcing the lords of Westeros to bend not to terror, but to law. In another, she never crosses the narrow sea at all, remaining in Meereen as a true queen of Slaver's Bay. And the Seven Kingdoms stumble on without ever seeing dragonfire over their walls. Each of these broken timelines asks the same thing this one does. If a single decision bends, how far do hearts, loyalties, and crowns follow after it? There is a quieter road as well, where a different father makes a different choice. Imagine a world where Ned Stark survives King's Landing, walks out of the Black Cells, and returns to Winterfell with his honor, battered but intact. As he grows up, Robb does not carry the full weight of the North alone, and the young wolves of House Stark receive not just stories of duty, but living correction and counsel from the man who embodied it. Sansa's betrothals, Arya's wandering, Jon's vows at the Wall, each one shifts, not because magic changes, but because a single lord continues to sit at his own hall's high seat. And it does not end there. In another thread, Jon's parentage is revealed early, not as a last whispered secret in a frozen crypt, but as a political fact that must be faced while Robert still drinks and rages in his castle. He feels neither love nor acceptance from the man who called him bastard, yet suddenly carries the name and blood that could unmake the entire Baratheon order. This only grows when Southern lords begin to see him not as a nameless boy at the feast's edge. Why, but as a potential heir whose existence could ignite a second rebellion before the first has even cooled. Each of these visions follows the same method as Tyrion's altered life here. The story does not simply swap one scene for another. It follows how a changed truth seeps into marriages and councils, into the silence between father and child, into the way a distant village hears the latest rumor from the capital and decides whom to follow. Every what-if becomes a study in character and consequence, in how far a single wound or kindness can echo. For those who find meaning in that kind of slow, deliberate unraveling, there is a standing hall here, a place where familiar tales are taken apart and patiently rebuilt. The next road might keep Tyrion in King's Landing, or send Daenerys down a gentler path, or let Ned Stark see his grandchildren running through Winterfell's snow. Or it might leave Westeros entirely and break open some other beloved world, applying the same relentless attention to its people, its politics, its fragile hopes. Those who remain, who choose to return whenever another question is raised, will see these realms again and again, each time from a new angle. Old scenes will be stripped back to bare stone, and then mortared together in unfamiliar shapes until battles, betrayals, and small mercies feel newly dangerous and newly alive. The next section will speak directly to how this particular road, where Tyrion's trial ends not in chains but in a different kind of power, sets up the long, uneasy future waiting for him, and for all those bound to his fate. One last look at the arena, why this moment matters most. So, return for a moment to the courtyard where everything almost ended. The air is still thick with dust and the copper sting of blood, the roar of the crowd fraying into shocked, disbelieving murmurs as the mountain's great bulk finally goes still. Oberyn Martell is standing, not gloating now, not circling, not demanding confessions from a dying monster. He is simply upright, spear butt planted in the churned earth, his breathing ragged, his eyes wide as if he himself cannot quite understand that he is alive. The skull that shattered is not his. The brains ground into the sand are not his. The red viper has not fallen. Across the yard, Tyrion blinks against the sun and the dust. The chains at his wrists have not yet been struck off, but they feel different, as if some invisible weight has slipped from them. A moment ago, he was already half a ghost, a condemned man watching the last sliver of his life drain away with every step, every feint, every missed thrust. Now the world surges back in, the scrape of armor, the hiss of silk, the distant cry of a hawker beyond the castle walls. This is the axis of his story. This is the single heartbeat in which the universe, for once, does not crush the clever, broken man who has spent his life surviving other people's cruelty. As he grows up in the shadow of Casterly Rock, he feels neither love nor acceptance from his father, only cold expectations and colder silences. He learns early that wit is his shield, that wine is his armor, that praise will never come from Tywin, no matter how many responsibilities he shoulders with quiet competence. Here, as in the dust of the Red Keep's yard, that long apprenticeship in suffering meets something else, a rare, almost obscene mercy. Trial by combat in Westeros is meant to be the gods' judgment, but for Tyrion, it has always felt like a final joke, another stage on which he is forced to dance for an audience that despises him. Yet this time, the joke does not land. This time, the crowd sees a Lannister who was supposed to die and does not. Many in that crowd will carry this day like a scar. A sellsword who bet his last coin on the mountain. A kitchen girl who whispered a prayer for the small man in chains. A knight who remembers another battlefield where one stroke of luck decided who went home and who rotted in the mud. Each has known some private trial by combat, some moment when a single word, a single hesitation, a single breath changed everything. Fiction returns to these thresholds again and again. It allows such moments to be replayed, recut, reimagined in safer spaces, where steel and poison and verdicts can be tested without shattering real lives. It lets a condemned son walk free, lets a father's plans falter, lets an entire kingdom tilt on a different fulcrum. It lets the same courtyard be seen twice, once as a grave, once as a doorway. And so, Tyrion walks out of the arena alive. The sand clings to his boots, the sun presses on his shoulders, the murmur of the crowd follows him like a tide that has not decided whether to cheer or to curse. He continues to put one foot in front of the other, feeling the shape of a future that should not exist, settling around him like an ill-fitting cloak. This only grows when he realizes that survival is not the end of his trial, but the beginning of a far more dangerous game, one in which the man who escaped death must now decide what to do with the life he has stolen back. Closing the book. For now. In that moment after the dust of the yard settles, when the crowd still cannot decide whether to cheer or to curse, a different kind of silence begins to spread. It is not the hush of fear before a beheading, but the quieter, stranger pause that follows a story, refusing to end where it was supposed to. Tyrion walks away from the trial by combat alive, and as he grows up inside this altered fate, every step he takes forces the rest of Westeros to move with him. A single victory in the Red Keep's yard unmoors Tywin's careful design, unravels Cersei's certainties. It then sends ripples through every village, every castle, every council chamber that once believed justice in King's Landing was a blunt, predictable thing. Anyone who has followed this long, winding path has watched how law, oaths, and steel become weapons in themselves, and how easily they bend when power presses its thumb upon the scales. Across this journey, the value lies less in the spectacle of Oberyn standing tall over the mountain, and more in what follows. A father forced to keep the son he tried to discard. A brother who remains the heir in name, but not in influence. A city learning that the man it mocked now holds its secrets in his hands. Through each turn, he feels neither love nor acceptance from those whose praise he once craved, yet he continues to maneuver, to bargain, to survive. This only grows when the game ceases to be about guilt or innocence and becomes a question of who is allowed to rewrite the rules. If there is any lesson buried beneath the banners and the blood, it is that character, law, and power in this world are never separate things. They interlock, they grind against each other, they decide which child is raised as an heir and which is thrown to the wolves. Change one verdict, spare one condemned man, and the whole edifice tilts. Tommen's reign steadies or shatters, the Tyrell alliance breathes easier or begins to rot. Distant dragons gain or lose the counselor who might have bridged two continents. Before this book closes, one last invitation remains. Somewhere along this alternate road, there was a moment that struck deepest. Perhaps Tywin forced to share a table with the son he can no longer lawfully destroy. Perhaps Cersei realizing that the brother she despises has become legally untouchable. Perhaps a quiet night where Tyrion stands on the walls and understands that survival has made him more dangerous than death ever could. Which choice seemed most inevitable, and which change felt like a betrayal of the tale that was known? And even as this telling ends, its branches do not. There are still corners of this timeline left in shadow. An Oberyn who returns to Dorne not as a martyr, but as a victor. A Daenerys who must conquer without a Lannister voice at her side. A Westeros where the lion's name carries a different weight. Each could be a journey of its own, another volume on the same shelf. Because as long as the question, what if, continues to echo through these halls, stories like Tyrion Lannister's will never truly finish. They pause, they fork, they wait in the dark between candles, ready to flare back to life the next time a different choice is imagined and a different future is allowed to stand.